This podcast has bad words.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn.
And I am Ryan Nicodemus, and together we are the Minimalists.
Welcome to episode 131. Today, we are going to talk about the Utah Jazz have made it past the first round of the playoffs.
Oh my God, how exciting. Do they have a chance, Josh?
I don't know, TK. Did the Utah Jazz have a chance this year? I mean, come on. They beat OKC. And by the way, we've lost 70% of our audience already. They're already deleting this. We never talk about sports on the podcast.
Ever.
So
I love it. So here's the crazy thing about both the Utah Jazz and the OKC series. First, at the end of the year, the Utah Jazz, they lose Gordon Hayward. And everybody counts them out. Everybody says these guys are going to be terrible. The Pacers lose Paul George. Paul George goes to OKC, and everybody says the Pacers are going to be terrible now. And Paul George is going to lead OKC to revenge against Golden State. And the complete opposite happens. Utah gets really good, and they beat the team that Paul George went to. And then the Pacers have a total breakout year and push LeBron and the Cavs to Game 7. Nobody thought at the beginning of the year that the Utah Jazz and the Indiana Pacers would look this impressive in the NBA playoffs. So maybe the absence of Gordon Hayward and Paul George kind of give us a new idea about how we can succeed in life. Get rid of your star player and you'll go further.
To me, it was it was like the perfect metaphor. Man. so like, in fact, I wrote this down for a reason because I gave up on basketball in 1998, Game 6 of the finals, because my team, the Utah Jazz, lost. Yeah, you remember Game 6. And anyway, so I just sort of gave up on basketball for the last 2 decades and finally decided to come back. But I was watching the series, and it was like, oh, this is the perfect metaphor for teamwork. You have this team in the Utah Jazz who probably doesn't have a top 20 player on their team. You could argue, I mean, you could make some arguments, but most likely they don't have a top 20 player, but they are the top 7 teams in the NBA right now, right? Yeah. And you look at this and you realize like, oh, like it is true that the whole is greater than these little parts that you have. Like you have some teams that have these great parts. You have a great performer, but a great performer doesn't necessarily make a great team. And
very rarely does like one performer. I mean, it happens.
Right.
But when you have a whole team that is supporting each other, you usually have a much better result. It makes me think about what we do with the Minimalists, man. It's like, I'm awesome. I know I'm awesome, man. No, but seriously, it's like, Josh is great. I'm great. But without Sean, this podcast isn't nearly as awesome.
It's just 2 guys rambling in a room and it's not being recorded.
Exactly. With a really bad, poorly produced podcast.
Right.
If it's not for Jess Williams, our social media isn't as awesome as it is. If it isn't for the people who help edit our books when we call out for people to edit those, I mean, it's every little piece makes a huge difference, man.
Absolutely. And so I think that I was watching my daughter. She's 4. She'll be 5 next month. She was playing soccer this weekend, and she is the Russell Westbrook of her soccer team. She has all the talent, but not the skill to play with a team. And so like, she's clearly the best and the worst player on the field at the same time. Like the most athletic, has the most talent, but then also is like, I saw a tweet this morning. It said, what position is it when my 5-year-old picks dandelions on the soccer field? Like, that's kind of the thing. Like, she's just not paying attention.
It's center picker.
Right. There's something going on there.
I think there's a great insight there. I wrote a blog post about this concept called Give Me a System, Not a Superstar, and how when we try to build organizations or create projects, it's easy to think that what we need is a superstar. Like, give me a big time money making venture capitalist, give me the world's greatest CEO. And sometimes when you have a whole lot of talent concentrated around a single person or a small group of people, it makes you lazy. Because you can compensate for all of the inefficiencies. When you've got a guy like Russell Westbrook who can will himself to a triple-double, who can just go crazy like he did in Game 5 and lead the team back to a massive comeback, taking over the game, it makes you kind of say things like, yeah, maybe we don't need an offense. Maybe we don't need to play defense because you can afford to get away with it. But when you're a team like the Utah Jazz and you don't have that star, you can't be lazy. So you've got to think about your system. You've got to have a sophisticated offense to run. And I think that's just an important lesson in life in general. It's easy to rely on your natural talent on the things that make you great, but it's important to step back and say, what would I do if I didn't have that? What's my Russell Westbrook, and what would I do if I didn't have Russell?
So let's see how we can apply that, because today we're going to talk about schooling and education and careers and college.
Should we introduce TK?
Well, we probably should. So now you all know that we don't do interviews, so that's not what we're here to do today. But occasionally we bring friends on, and we have a new friend with us today to help us answer some questions that some folks have. We have TK Coleman in the building. Ladies and gentlemen, TK Coleman. TK, you are the education director at a company called Praxis, a company that you founded. Can you talk a little bit about what you do at Praxis, what your company does?
Absolutely. So Praxis is a career launch program where we help aspiring professionals establish the foundation upon which they can build their careers. And we orient education around their goals. One of the analogies I like to use is I like to say we're fitness trainers for people's career. When you go to the gym, your fitness trainer doesn't tell you, all right, I want you to run around that track, or I want you to lift some weights. Your fitness trainer starts with you. Your fitness trainer says, why are you here? And maybe your reason is you've got a wedding coming up and you want to fit into that suit and look nice. Maybe your reason is there's a marathon coming up and I want to succeed in that marathon. You get to establish what the goal is. And then what the fitness trainer does is they help create a set of experiences that show you how to use the tools in a way that helps you get where you want to be. So every gym has all of this equipment, but each person who comes to the gym uses that equipment in a customized way, in a way that caters to what it is they're trying to seek after. So my philosophy of education is essentially this. Education doesn't begin with some elitist, bureaucratic notion of what people ought to learn. Education begins with what results you, the learner, want to create, right? And what the teacher knows becomes relevant once that information has been obtained. And the teacher uses their knowledge, their experience, their resources to help you create those results. So that's essentially what Praxis aims to do philosophically. The way we go about it is it's a 1-year program. And when participants come into the program, they spend the first 6 months doing what we call our entrepreneurial professional boot camp. They learn all sorts of things about, digital literacy, personal branding, how to create value propositions, how to find their voice as writers, communicators, all these different types of things. And then in the subsequent 6 months, they work at a startup and they learn by doing. They learn how to create value in the marketplace. They don't play with fake money. They don't pretend to do business. They deal with real customers, real responsibilities, because our conviction is that if the risk involved in the learning process are not real, then the rewards of the learning process are not real. So that's, in a nutshell, what we do.
If people want to learn more about Praxis, where do they go to check it out?
Discover, as in discover a new world, discoverpraxis.com. That's Praxis. Discoverpraxis.com.
Beautiful. Sean, if you put a link to that in the show notes as well, then people can check that out. And the reason I wanted to bring you in here today, TK, is I've been a fan of your work for a while. I first found out about you from Steve Patterson's podcast. You have some views that you aren't afraid to talk about with respect to race and with respect to politics, two things that we'll steer away from today, but maybe we'll have you back on and we can talk about those topics
sure
as well. For me,
I can minimalize my friendships.
I was really impressed by your ability to communicate some thoughts that are maybe considered against the grain, against the status quo, or even avant-garde thoughts in a way that were, for me, helped me sort of solidify my position on a few things. And I think you do a really good job through your blog or through your podcast, and we can certainly talk about those. And so I thought today you were the perfect person, because we had a few questions to dive into about schooling and education. So folks want to know what direction in which they should go. You all think we should dive into these questions?
Let's do it.
All right. Our first question today is from Brianna in New York.
I'm 23 years old, and I've been working at a hotel for a year now and a few months, and I have found myself being incredibly miserable with what I'm doing. I'm a housekeeper. I deal with a lot of stress, a lot of pressure from my department, especially from the director of my department. And it's just not a right job for me. It's just not a right job for me. And I want to leave, but it's difficult for me to find another job at the current moment because I'm spending so much time at the hotel that I work at. And I'm just absolutely miserable there. And I deal with, cleaning tons of rooms, and just being very organized is very difficult because I have a cart and I have to put a lot of stuff on it, and I just feel like I'm very disorganized when I'm there, and I'm just really, really stressed out and just not happy. The only time I'm going to leave is when I don't have to be there, and I've been thinking about going to college, but I've kind of put that to the side for a bit because I've just been so overwhelmed with everything. Thinking about what I'm going to do next with my life, thinking about, where I'm going to live in the future, my social life, which I don't really have right now. And I just want your advice on what to do. Should I leave the job and with my sanity, or should I stay until I find another job?
All right, so the first thing I thought about, well, two things I thought about here, Ryan, is the first thing, I saw this tweet recently, and the tweet was, I don't remember what I wanted to be when I was growing up, but I know it wasn't this.
Right.
Oh.
What a bad feeling, man.
Yeah, and for me, I remember when someone asked me, I was a little kid, it must have been Ella's age, I was probably 4, and someone asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be either an alligator or a ninja.
That was a good dream.
Yeah, right. And I mean, I don't know what Freud would say about those things, but maybe the alligator is I want to have thicker skin, and the ninjas, I just want to have a really silent job. But the other thing that I thought about, and I think that's an important question for Brianna, is is what you're doing now what you envisioned you'd be doing? And if not, that's okay. You can be in a position right now where you're paying your bills, but what are you moving toward? But the other thing, I just want to acknowledge her because I hear this despair in her voice.
Oh, yeah.
And
she's in a tornado right now.
Absolutely, right. And I've gone through years of despair. When a moment when I thought I was supposed to be at the peak of my life, right? When I was 28 years old, I was the youngest director on our company's 140-year history. I managed 150 retail stores. I was living this life of ostensible success, but it wasn't my version of being successful, right? It was this life been given this template, and I fulfilled the template, not realizing that my ladder was leaned against the wrong building. I just continued to climb that ladder, and oh crap, now I'm really high up here, and I haven't reached the place where I want to go. I didn't feel like I was fostering my creativity or my relationships or my health. I was working 80 hours a week doing something that was not fulfilling. I got little bits of ephemeral pleasure because I had paychecks that allowed me to buy things or finance things that gave me these fleeting pleasures, but it wasn't the same thing as happiness or contentment.
It's funny, man. I started working in the corporate world with you solely based on the salary, solely based on those commission checks that you were showing me that you were paying out to the people that you were managing. Mm-hmm. And I remember I just saw those paychecks and I'm like, oh, I want to get paychecks like that. I want to make that much money. And so I started, selling cell phones, very entry level position. And what happened is as I got bigger and bigger paychecks, I started basically putting myself into more and more debt. Yeah. So I kind of created this situation where it sounds like, maybe Brianna is in this situation now where you start a job just thinking, all right, this is what's going to help me get by. And then you accumulate all of this debt and you build a lifestyle around what that job provides for you. And you all of a sudden realize you're stuck and that it feels very impossible to get out. Let's talk about what is step number one for Brianna here?
I think she's on step number one. So okay. The second thing that I thought about here is, so she's asking some questions, mm-hmm. and that is so important. When we first talk about minimalism and simplifying, people are like, "What's the first thing you should do?" I'm like, ask yourself, how might your life be better with less? Mm. because that question helps you understand the why behind the what. The what becomes much easier if you understand why you're doing what you're doing. And I'm holding here in my hand this short essay from TK Coleman. You can find it on his blog, tkcoleman.com. And let's just talk about it. I won't read the whole thing here, but the title of it is Question Everything, Not Just the Alternatives. I'm just going to read the first paragraph, and maybe it'll be a good jump off point for us. Because TK wrote here, if you want to go to college and still be accepted by your family and friends, you don't need a good reason for attending. The world will gladly accept your decision and praise you for it without the slightest bit of scrutiny. If you want to pursue an alternative, however, get ready for the most intense interrogation of your life, because people will finally begin to care about all sorts of questions they'd never dare pose to a college student or college administrator.
Amen.
And you go on to talk about how actually this questioning is good. This sort of self-interrogation is good. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, alternatives to the status quo, or things that show up in our lives as disruptions, tend to make us ask questions. But the thing to keep in mind is that those questions can also be asked of the things that we're currently doing. And some of the most valuable insights come from identifying those assumptions that have become invisible to us, because there are a lot of things that show up as reality. They show up as the way it is, when in reality, that's just a point of view. That's just a particular focal setting that can be challenged, and new vistas of possibility, so to speak, can be opened up as a result of that process of questioning. So as it pertains to this concern, this question that we're addressing, one thing I would question is the opportunity that is in front of you. What opportunities am I overlooking? Not what opportunities do I need to seek that are in some other place, but what about the opportunities that are where I'm currently located? So I'll use an analogy from Disney, The Princess and the Frog. You have this frog who is really a prince that has been cursed and has taken this hideous, ugly form. And if the princess kisses the frog, that frog will turn into a prince. Now, everybody wants a prince. Every princess wants a prince, but nobody wants to kiss that damn frog, right? So how do you get the prince? By hoping for a prince, by wishing for a prince, by waiting for a prince. No, you got to kiss that ugly, hideous frog while it's ugly and hideous, right? And the act of kissing that ugly thing is what transforms it into this beautiful thing that you've always dreamed of. Sometimes we make the mistake of waiting for our lives to become lovable before we live it. Right? But you have to love your life in order for it to become livable. My dad talks a lot about how people make such a big deal about the law of attraction, right? If I focus on the things that I want, maybe I can bring those things into my experience, but they don't focus on what he calls the law of recognition, which is practicing my ability to see the opportunities that are already there, so that I'm not focusing on attracting things, but rather taking advantage of what is already here with me. So my first step would be to say, step back for a moment and realize that the fastest way to get where you want to be is by learning to appreciate where you are and respect yourself for what you're currently doing. And I don't mean that in some mystical, vague sense. Like, if you respect yourself and if you're grateful, life will just give you all the opportunities.
Gratitude is the attitude.
Yeah, right. But really, when you live in a state of appreciation and self-respect, you become more playful, you become more creative, you become more intelligent. It actually makes you a better decision maker. Your ability to recognize opportunity improves. And what happens is, so many people, when they find themselves in jobs they don't like, they despise themselves for having that job. They look at themselves as losers for working that job. And they kind of have an attitude that says, I'm not going to be a winner. I'm not going to be a self-respecting person until I find that dream job, and that dream job will be the thing that confers upon me my value. But you've got to step back and you got to say, okay, wait a minute. This job is like my first investor. Okay. This job is something that I chose to do because it can be a means through which I create something else that I desire. Mike Murdoch says that a champion is someone who's willing to do what he hates in order to create what he loves, right? So this job that I'm working, even though I hate it, is a testament to the fact that I love what I'm creating so much that I'm willing to do things that are difficult that other people wouldn't even be willing to do in order to create the things that matter most to me. I would contend that it is simply not possible to find a better opportunity without respecting yourself as a badass for doing the thing that you're doing right now.
Yeah, and by the way, Brianna's doing a job that is much needed. Ryan and I stay in a lot of hotels while we are doing the tour stops that we've done in the past, and I'll tell you that I'm appreciative every single time I show up and there's an actual clean room for me.
You know, we were in Melbourne, and we had like accidentally left our sign on. The do not disturb sign on.
Right.
And Mariah and I went away for the day, came back and realized like, oh crap, like we didn't, and we needed like new towels and stuff. So we called the front desk, they sent someone up, and you could tell like she, like, cause we were in the room, like she's in there straightening everything up. And like, you could just tell she was like trying to like not be in our way, trying to be as, least offensive or intrusive as possible. And like, I just stopped her for a second. I'm like, I just want to let you know something. Like this hotel is awesome. And like, so far we've had an amazing experience. And what you're doing right now is part of that experience. And without you, this whole thing doesn't happen. And like Josh and I, we go way out of our way to show not just, the maid, but anyone we come into contact with when we're having a really good experience for sure.
It could be a barista, it could be someone working at the Kinko's where you're getting your copies made. If they're going out of their way to create a good experience, it's possible for you to be in that experience and be truly joyous. We've all experienced it. Someone who's working, these supposedly crappy jobs because whatever, because Instagram doesn't deem it to be the nicest job in the world. Yeah. Guess what? That's not real life. Real life is we work. Even people who do things that aren't considered, the same type of work that we've all done at some point. I've been a busboy. I've washed dishes. I've worked retail. I've done these jobs. I've shoveled snow. Those are the real jobs, and it's possible to be completely joyous within that experience. It doesn't mean you have to do it forever, and I think that's where this despair comes in. Is people think, what I'm doing today and yesterday equals the future. No, it doesn't. Today equals today, and it's possible for you to be the best version of whatever today is, warts and all, and then figure out where do you go from here. So Brianna clearly doesn't want to be doing this for the rest of her life. We know that. She's 23 years old.
We support her in not doing this the rest of her life.
but instead of just running away from this, she has to also have something to run to. Is that right in your estimation?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a Hunger Games interpretation to what we're saying that I definitely want to make sure we're avoiding, which is, be happy with your lowly job while I sit here on the towers with my wealth, drinking a glass of wine, right? Where people who live these elite privileged lifestyles speak to the people who complain as if your only problem in life is that you're not sufficiently grateful, right? Just be grateful for what you have, and I will live this luxurious good life, in my ivory tower or whatever it may be. Right. I'm not saying that at all. It all begins with self-respect, because self-respect makes you a better thinker. It makes you a better opportunist. It makes you a better creator. So one step two, I would suggest, is in the spirit of the Stoic maxim, the obstacle is the way. So one of the problems, the obstacle she identified, is that she works too much. She wants to find another job, but she doesn't have time. Right. So because she's spending too many hours working. So it seems on the surface as if the best move is to figure out a way to work less hours so that you can go find another job. But maybe the obstacle is the way in this sense. Maybe you can work more hours. I know that sounds crazy, but one exercise you can do is you can ask yourself, how much money do I need to save in order to be able to survive 3 months without my job? Then do that exercise for 2 months. And do that exercise for 1 month, okay? And then work more hours, even though you're already working a lot, for however long you need to work in order to save that amount. Then you can leave that job, and you've just bought yourself 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, depending on how you execute that plan, to go find or create whatever it is you want to find and create. And at that point, you're completely free. You're not worried about your job, and you don't have the stress of how I'm going to pay my bills in the meantime. So that's one possibility. It's not the only way, but that's one possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get concrete here. So you say that going to find what you want to create, but it sounds to me right now like Brianna doesn't know what she wants to create. She's I'm working here, I feel stuck, I feel despair, and I think part of that despair is because I don't know where to go from here. So it's great that we see these successory posters that say follow your passion. But what the hell does that mean in concrete terms for someone who is 23 and lost, and she's actually thinking about, maybe I should just go to college because college has all the answers.
I love your approach, TK, with kind of coming up with this plan, because I know you're a Tony Robbins fan, like Josh and I are, and to me, like, that is coming up with that plan, coming up with that goal is a great way to change your state. And I think that's really what you're trying to say. Am I right on that? Like, she needs to find a way to change her state to look at the situation she is in a little bit differently.
Absolutely. And I think something that's important to keep in mind about the creative process, whether that's making art or finding a new job, is that making improvements or making progress is much better than pursuing perfection, right? And the number one enemy of progress is the idealization of perfection, this belief that, it's got to be all or nothing. So here's the thing. If you are working a job that you absolutely hate, we all heard the way that she talks about her job. She doesn't like it. That's cool. We've all felt that way about different jobs. That means the bar is probably pretty low for something that you can like better than that. Okay. Now, if you put the pressure on yourself to go from a job I hate to my dream job, that's just going to make this whole process a lot more stressful. You're 23 years old. You may not even know what your dream job is for a few more years until you get some more experiences
too. I mean,
right.
Your dream job at 25 is going to be different from your dream job at 35 or 55.
Absolutely. So all you have to do is find something that you like better than that job, or find something that you hate less than that job. Okay. So I worked a job that I absolutely hated. And I worked at a restaurant, and I worked tons of hours, never had enough time to even think or anything like that. And I made a semi-sideways step into a job that I also didn't like. But the cool thing about the job that I didn't like was that it ended at 6 o'clock. And that meant I could go home and I could read books, I could work on ideas, I could take walks, I could think about what I wanted to do, because my workday ended. I was no longer working till 2 a.m. every day. And that became something that I was able to leverage into the next step. So think in terms of leverage and levels. What's a step I can make that gives me incremental progress? And then I can use some of the conveniences and opportunities in that step to sort of explore and experiment with the next step.
Yeah, when it comes to Brianna looking at the next job, I mean, the first thing I have written down for her to do is to get clear on what her values and beliefs are. Because sometimes, yes, we know we need to leave a job. We know that we might go into a job that isn't going to be our dream job. It's going to be maybe this next step towards something better. But some people don't even know how to approach that next step. And for me, it's getting clear on what it is that makes Brianna tick. And it could even start with stuff that she hates. I mean, is it the fact that she hates not having time to look for a different job? Maybe step number 2 for Brianna is just finding a job that she hates just as much, but maybe it gives her the time to focus on some things that again will give her that progress. What do you think, Millie?
I think she is looking for an easy out, and I think sometimes college is that easy out because people think of it as a 2 to 4 to 5 year break, right? And so she's not even looking at what is the next job, what is the next career path. She's looking for an exit ramp. And we often mistake, I think, college and going into a lifetime worth of debt. It's the only thing in the world, I think, that we hand the keys of a Lamborghini over to an 18-year-old and say, hey, good luck with this. There's no insurance on it. And please don't crash, right? And then, of course, we end up going somewhere, like we end up as a dog walking major, and you figured out that, like, well, wait a minute, this was just a detour for me because someone else, that's why I was reading your essay earlier, TK, is someone else gives you this template, and everyone, this is a societal template now. And I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with college. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but for me, there's something inherently wrong with thinking there is an answer when there are multiple answers out there. And I think quite often we look at college as like, well, that's going to give me the skills I need to be better prepared for the workplace. Yeah. And I think that's not necessarily so.
If Brianna wants to be a brain surgeon, then go. If that's what she's truly passionate about, and like she has gone through and really discovered that, yes, being a brain surgeon really aligns with her values and beliefs, then go to college, Brianna. But college, I agree with you, Josh. It is not an exit ramp. It is, in a lot of cases, it could be a situation, jumping out of the fryer into the frying pan, except when you add debt to that equation, it's like jumping out of the fryer into a bigger fryer, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. All right, so 2 things. One about curiosity, the other about college. Regarding curiosity, I think following your curiosity, or rather experimenting with your curiosity, is far more important than finding your passion, right? Finding your passion, that's a hell of a lot of pressure. What in the world is my passion? I now have to reduce the entirety of my life, the totality of my being, to the one thing that I love more than anything else. I mean, who knows what that is, right? And if you think you know what that is, you're probably wrong, right? So, and then not only that, but if I find my passion and then I announce it to the world and I justify it and I defend it, what happens if I experiment with that for 3 months and now I'm bored with it? Now I look like a flake. Now I look like a liar. Now I look like I'm somebody that's over dramatic. That's just way too much pressure. Instead of trying to find your passion, just follow your curiosity. Find something that seems interesting to you now, and without pressuring yourself to have all the answers or know that this is what you're going to want to do in 30 years, just investigate your curiosity without a sense of loss. Investigate your curiosity with the confidence that even if you turn out not to like it, you will discover valuable things about yourself that will be transferable to future pursuits. That's the first thing. But
the thing that popped in my head, when we first started the Minimalists.com almost 8 years ago, I remember we had friends in the blogging space who, like, they would start a new blog every 30 days and like just abandon the old one, not like following curiosity, but like all of a sudden they would just dive. I'm really passionate about barefoot running this month, and then I'm really these really obscure things, which is great if you're following your curiosity and you're like experimenting with these different things. But people would get their whole identity wrapped up in this thing is I'm supposed to be passionate about paleo barefoot running on Thursdays, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that is so specific that doesn't seem to me like a passion so much as a curiosity. I like that following the curiosity eventually allows you to cultivate passions. And the thing we were talking about earlier, the thing you're passionate about now, you might be passionate about for a decade, but it may not be a lifelong pursuit either, and that's okay. And I think the other thing to cultivate that's really important is your willingness to see something through, but also your willingness to walk away if it's no longer serving a purpose in your life, right? I no longer play with G.I. Joes because they don't serve a purpose in my life, but they did at one point. And I think our willingness to walk away is the sort of superpower that we're able to cultivate that allows us to pursue those curiosities. Now, TK, you were getting ready to say something about college.
Okay, man, if Isaac Morehouse is listening to this right now, he's got to be cringing because it seems like every time I open my mouth, I move it away from college and school, but I'm coming back to it, I promise you. But I got to say something about what you just said about dreams. One of the things that I believe the most about pursuing your dreams is that you not only have to follow your dreams, but you have to let your dreams follow you. One of the most underestimated things about dreams is that the very act of pursuing something that we want is an alchemical process. It transforms us. You cannot remain the person that you are when you're visualizing a dream, when you take action steps towards its realization. So dreams transform you. And when they transform you, it's important to take pauses and look back on your life and ask yourself, how have I evolved? And how can I upgrade my dreams accordingly? One of the great tragedies, and we see it in a city like LA, is you have a lot of people who come to LA at 18, 19, 20 to be actors. And at 25, 26, 27, they don't have the passion for it anymore. They don't really love the work, but they're slaves to the dream that was conceived by a former version of themselves. And they feel like if I go work in an office, if I go work in corporate America, if I start a business, then I'm a sellout because I'm beholden to the dreams that I had when I was 19. I fought for these dreams. I announced them. I wrote blogs saying this is what I'm going after and I don't want this anymore. Does that make me a bad person? Forget about that. You are an evolving person. You're never going to be the same. Now that you've pursued your dream for 3, 4, 5 years, you're someone different than you were when you didn't know anything about it. So don't just follow your dreams. Let your dreams follow you. Upgrade your dreams to reflect the person you are always in the process of becoming.
Can I interject?
Wait, I want to interject too.
And then make sure we get to college.
Real quick.
We'll get there.
So, Sean, if you put a link to a talk that TK has.
You're still in my added value, man.
Oh, am I? No,
Stop. No, totally link it because I forget. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, it works really well here. So
it really absolutely does.
Dreams don't come true, decisions do. Right?
Amen. It's a great talk.
And so I think that's a good place to start about taking action as opposed to just wishing for the thing to happen.
What I love about what TK just said is he was saying that sometimes we find ourselves stuck. We find ourselves in a tornado like Brianna has, and it's kind of our own doing. And if we stop, sometimes, this isn't every single time, but sometimes if we stop to think about why we're in a situation we are in, we've got to look at the rules that we've created for ourselves. And like the rule that TK was just talking about, the rule was, well, I'm not allowed to be happy unless my 18-year-old dream comes true. And at 25 years old, that hasn't come true yet. Is that still going to be my rule for being happy?
Wow. So what you're saying is sometimes we set up the shittiest rules that we don't even realize we're playing by. Like out of bounds for us is the foul line in basketball, and you're like, well, wait a minute, that's not an actual rule. Like, I imposed that rule on myself, and what I'm saying is maybe I don't need the rules that I've created, or maybe I've just outgrown some of the rules that I've created. And our willingness to let go of some of those rules, I think some rules are still important.
Absolutely. And some of those rules aren't shitty. Some of them they serve a great purpose at that time in our life.
Yes, they provided the appropriate boundaries then, but now those boundaries, as we've grown, are now inappropriate. I think about having a 4-year-old, she'll be 5 this month, and the boundaries that we have to put up now, they're changing, since she was 2, and they'll continue to change as she gets older and grows. But of course, as adults, we continue to grow, but in a different way. And so I think the boundaries that we set up for ourselves, sometimes we need to tear those boundaries down. Otherwise, we're rotting in our self-imposed prisons.
Yes, I want to actually. I do want to talk to Brianna about some different ways she can change her state, because I think it's really important for her to change her state. We've given her one idea about coming up with a plan to kind of give herself a safety net to exit. But before I digress on that, let's go back to the college. You want to talk about that yet, or you got something else you want to talk about?
Yeah. So, man, first of all, you quoted me, "Dreams don't come true, decisions do." Let me give you guys a shout out for that, because I think I've had like 100 people follow me. Because y'all talked about that on an episode.
Well, yeah, so follow TK on Twitter at TK_Coleman.
Well, TK, I want to say, man, it's so funny. People all the time, they will, send me emails. Hey, I'm coming out with this book. Can I give you a copy of my book? And, do you mind reading it and giving me a blurb? And usually what I'll say is like, no, I don't have time to read every single book offered to me. I'm a slow reader and I get a lot of offers. But what I would love to do is I would love to help support you by sending out a tweet or, something on social media to promote the book. Here's the thing though, man, is like we could send people your way all day long, but the reason why they stick around is because of you. It's not because the Minimalists blurbed you. We could blurb every single person that we know, but if they stick around and read your stuff, TK, it's for you. So thank you, man, for doing what you do, brother.
Amen. Yeah, and we'd lose credibility real quick.
Absolutely, we would. So thanks for keeping us credible.
Yeah, exactly.
I appreciate that. The dreams, a little plug, the dreams don't come true, decisions do. That's from a talk I gave at FeeCon. You can check that talk out with the same title on YouTube.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes too.
Sure. Yeah. And the basic idea there is I like to draw an analogy between dreams and decisions and desire and love. Desire, that's the stuff you long for, whereas love is what you're willing to live for. Desire is what you care about. Love is what you're committed to, right? The idea here is I heard one poet say that love is desire raised to a higher power. And we live in a world that encourages us to think about what we're passionate about without also thinking about what we're willing to prioritize, to be true to our desires without being true to the honest truth about what we're willing to commit to when it's all laid on the line. So for instance, there's an Alan Watts video on YouTube where he talks about the idea of what would you do if money were no object.
Yeah.
And I think that's an immensely valuable exercise because, it's good to sit back and say, hey, if everything was free and there were no costs, what would I do then if I wasn't influenced by scarcity and sacrifice? And I think that's useful, but that only tells us about your desires.
Right.
That only tells us about your passions. It doesn't tell us about your priorities and what you're willing to commit to. I not only want to know what you would be willing to do if there were no costs, I want to know what you'd be willing to do if it cost you everything. I don't want to know what you're willing to do if money were no object, but what are you willing to do in spite of the fact that money is an object in the world that we live in?
Right.
And I think it's important for people to think about both sides of that. And this idea of dreams don't come true, decisions do, is kind of getting at that notion. College.
Well, hold on. That's a great talk by Alan Watts. We'll make sure to find that and put a link to it in the show notes also. College.
Yes. So, the thing you were talking about is this notion that there is only one way. This is rooted again in an idea about education that is relatively modern, which is that a bunch of authority figures or political elites gather together and decide what constitutes a good citizen. And then we establish a system of compulsory education to make everybody study those things, even if those things aren't relevant to their own goals, where we take the power away from parents and we take the power away from learners, and we put bureaucrats who don't even have to bear the consequences of the education. And we put them in charge of deciding what people will learn, what people will study, what it means to be smart, and so forth. And so what happens is we end up with the world where we think about education in terms of right and wrong. And so we have what I consider to be these completely meaningless and arrogant debates about what kind of education young people should pursue. To me, this is silly because we don't have debates about whether someone should take a yoga class or a Tai Chi class. You take the class that you want to take based on what you're interested in.
Yeah.
We don't have debates about, well, should adults take courses in meditation or should adults take courses in piano? It doesn't matter, right? What do you want to do? Are you interested in piano? Because if you're not, then take the meditation course or something else that you're interested in. But we do something to young people that we never allow to be done to ourselves. We treat this thing called learning as if it's about something other than what you want to create and what you need to know in order to bring that forth. So I think the idea that there is a one right way is a very dangerous idea.
I heard you and Isaac, you have a podcast together called Office Hours, which you can check out wherever you get your podcasts. And I think that you were talking about how silly it is because, well, and the same thing with this essay, we start bringing up these, well, I want to go because of the social experience. Like, you can have that without taking on tuition. You can have the social, like, if that's truly the reason you're going to college is for the social experience, then just move to the college town that you want to move to and have the social experiences. Audit the classes that you want to take. Can you talk a little bit about that? About having, if you really want the college experience, why you don't necessarily need the traditional college experience?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing that stops anyone from moving to a college town, renting an apartment, and attending college parties, and attending college basketball games, attending football games, hanging out with the students. You don't have to be a college student to do all these things? You don't have to be a college student to do those things. And you'll probably have way more fun. You'll probably have a much better time and make more friends.
You can go to the parties without worrying about studying for the finals.
Right. Exactly. You can even party during finals week.
Oh, my goodness.
And in fact, in spite of what someone is probably going to write in the comments, well, not at my university, or, well, there's technically a rule that doesn't allow it. Let's keep it real for a second. You can pretty much go into any college lecture that you want, provided that it's not a class of only like 5 to 10 people where you'll stick out like a sore thumb. And you can sit in that class and you can listen to the lecture. You can learn about the materials, without even enrolling to get credit.
And by the way, you can do that online now. And I mean, from Yale and Harvard and a bunch of other places, if you just want to listen to some lectures, you can do that from your couch.
Absolutely. And I don't think, by the way, that the social experience is the real reason. In fact, here is a proposal I would suggest. Let's say all universities said, we're going to continue doing things as we have always done them. We'll continue hosting classes. We'll keep this campus. People will enroll, blah, 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 blah. The one thing we're going to change, however, is we don't give you a degree at the end of the experience. Okay? How many people do you think are going to continue going? The moment you take away that degree, the moment you take away the thing that says, this is what validates your experience, this is what signals to the adults in your life that you are a responsible person, that you weren't just fooling around. Yeah.
You're willing to and by the way, a lot of employers are looking for that. They are looking for the conformity side of things, right? Like, I want you to prove to me that you can conform to. So the reason
I would dispute that. I would challenge that. I don't think employers look for conformity.
Well, I think it depends on who the employer is, right, and what the role is, right. If you're,
I'm going to take a step further and say I don't think there's a single employer who looks for conformity.
Okay, so you're saying in Brianna's job, they're not looking for someone who's going to conform to the rules and regulations of what she's doing right now.
I think that certainly appears to be the case, but I think there's something more fundamental that we're calling conformity because our idea of this more fundamental thing is vague. I think what employers want is a combination of social intelligence and value creation. What everybody in every relationship wants is a partner that's going to do a really good job at identifying what they need and then meeting that need. And it just so happens that if you are intellectually lazy and you just conform and play the rules, there's a decent probability that you'll do that, right? If I'm your buddy and I say to you, well, what do you want? What do you want? Just tell me what you want and I'll do it. There's a decent chance that I'll kind of make you happy in that way, but I'll probably miss out on some opportunities to be creative and make you happy in ways that you probably couldn't give me instructions for how to do.
Right.
So we call that conformity because that's our only understanding of how to create value. But what employers are looking for are people who can walk in, understand what the vision is for that business, what the goals are for that business, and then figure out ways to help realize that goal. I have never met, and I never will meet, a single employer who would get angry at a worker if that worker did the following two things. Number one, made the business more profitable as a result of their being there. And number two, did it in a way that was so classy and smooth that they actually shared the credit and made the person that they work for look good in the process. You can't do that through conformity, and there is no one that would get upset at that. That's creativity,
so
not conformity.
I think what TK is saying is that employers, they're not looking for conformity. But what I think you're saying, and I agree with you, Josh, is that there are employers who accept conformity within their employees. I mean,
maybe
like how many employees did we have where like they conformed, they did exactly what they were supposed to do, but we just always looked at them like, God, we wish you would like really take some stuff in your own hands and do things a little bit differently and think for yourself.
Yeah, the people who really stood out were doing exactly what you were talking about. So when we managed a bunch of retail stores and managed salespeople and operations people or whoever it might be, it's the people like Harding worked with us. So we've got Podcast Sean here, and
he was one of the best employees at the corporation, and we stole him.
Yeah, and the thing was like he did things that weren't conforming but were above it. It was value creation, as you called it, right? And for us that was not just noteworthy, but it was praiseworthy, and he wasn't worried about taking all the credit either, because he knew who was doing it. He got the credit that he deserved, but he was also willing to go out of his way to create value for the company. He wasn't conforming to the norms. He met the norms, right. And so yes, corporations and companies and small businesses, they don't want people who are going to sabotage the company, obviously. And maybe that's what I meant by conformity, is there are some norms within which you need to stay, right? But that's true for driving down the street as well. You have a person who's driving down the median, that's going to be a problem for everyone, right? And so I think for this exercise, what I'm talking about here, whether it's Brianna or we pan out a little bit, we're going to have people who are like, hey, my son or daughter is thinking about going to college, and of course that is the right thing. That's what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. Why isn't that the thing that they're supposed to do?
Because the world is changing, right? And this is an undeniable fact. We do not live in the world that our parents grew up in, that our grandparents grew up in. So for the sake of argument, I'm going to concede the point, even though I think the point I'm conceding is debatable. But I'm going to concede the point that 10, 20, 30 years ago, a degree was necessary to be a player in the professional world, okay?
Or at least helpful. You're going to concede that it was at least helpful.
Sure. We'll make that concession. And I think this is analogous to saying 15, 20 years ago, getting a taxi was the best way to get around if you were trying to go somewhere and you couldn't walk or bike and you didn't have access to the bus, right? That was the way to go. 15 years ago, you didn't hear me bragging about Uber. You heard me taking the taxi, right? Because that was the option of my day 15 years ago. What Uber has done is it has taken what the taxi provides and it has reduced the costs. It's made it more convenient, more accessible, right? There are all these different advantages that Uber has that taxi cabs don't have, even though we still have people that will fight for the taxi cab, right? And Uber represents, or just ride sharing, period, because I know someone's listening who has a problem with the CEO of Uber, but let's not limit the concept of ride sharing to Uber. There are many different companies that do it. But what ride sharing does for us, or what it represents rather, is the changing world in which we live. There are new ways to get around. There are new ways to transport ourselves from one place to another. There's no reason for us not to expect that this is also true of everything else, namely education. There are new ways emerging with the way technology is providing us with other options. There are new ways for how we can transport ourselves from one place to another. There are new ways for how we can launch our careers. And I would say in many ways, Isaac Morehouse uses this metaphor, college is like taking a train or taking a bus. It's a very linear approach to career development. And what we're doing at Praxis, it's more like taking a rocket into space. We're not trying to move you forward. We're trying to help you transcend the existing paradigm and play the professional game at a level that college isn't even designed to teach. Okay, this is an important thing, that college doesn't even profess or claim to teach. But one of the challenges is that, as with any alternatives, because this is the nature of the status quo bias, when things are new, we question them. When things are familiar and old, we just kind of assume it's the way it is and it's kind of right or whatever. But one of the challenges of doing something other than college is that you got to pay a high social cost. Now, this is something that I know because I work with a lot of young people who choose to opt out of college. They're enjoying their lives, they're living successfully, and most of them have major challenges from families or adults in their lives who worry about them and get upset with them because of this.
What kind of objections do you see with the, I mean, what are the common objections that the family members see? Because I see it all the time. Most families want the best for their kids, right? And so it's not that they're like challenging them out of malice or like, I really want to stunt your growth. I think quite often they don't realize it is stunting. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'm going to make a riskier claim here. You just said parents want what's best for their children.
Yes.
I think at a certain level that's true. But I think there is some benefit in investigating that, subjecting that to scrutiny. Here's something that we all know about parents. They're humans too, right? Parents, just like young people, have insecurities, just insecurities about different things. One of the benefits of being an adult is when you get 30 or 40, you realize that we have all the same problems. It's just that the toys are different, right? We play with different toys. We play with, automobiles and houses and fancy titles and jobs and things along those lines. I heard one person say that adult problems are simply youth problems left unresolved. That there are just youth problems and that's it, right? So adults are insecure as well. Now think about when young people make what seems to be stupid decisions. Most of those stupid decisions are the result of insecurity. Yeah, at a certain level, young people want what's best, but young people often compromise what is best for them by prioritizing fitting in, prioritizing, not making a ruckus, not standing out, not being alienated. And parents are subject to the same temptations. So we can't fool ourselves into thinking that parents make decisions about their children's lives from this emotionally detached state where they experience no insecurities about what other people are going to think of them, and they're just doing economic calculations about cost and benefits for their children.
Because what their children do is also a reflection on of their performance as parents.
Yes, and you better believe it. If your son Billy, I know you don't have a son named Billy, but if your son Billy,
not that I know of,
if your son Billy says, "Dad, I don't want to go to University of Kansas. I want to go do this apprenticeship thing, or I want to start my own business," your friends are going to talk with you, and you'll be like, "Hey, how's your daughter Katie? Oh, Katie's doing good. She's starting college, this August, and she's really excited. How's Billy doing? Oh, Billy's doing good. He's going to be starting a business and stuff like that. Oh, okay. Is he not going to college? No. He's got this entrepreneurship thing that he wants to do. And now here comes all the questions that no other 18-year-old is going to get. Well, what kind of entrepreneurship thing? But by the way, I think this is so funny. Every other week, I see some 18-year-old on Facebook announcing that they got accepted into college. and all you see are like 50 to 100 comments of just congratulations, 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 congratulations. Nobody gets on there and says, well, are you sure that's the right college? No one gets on there and says, well, what's your major? Because you want to make sure that you pick the right major. No one says, well, what's your purpose for going to college? How are you just going to fit in, or how are you going to use that degree? Right? No one poses those questions. We just sort of grant them the assumption that you're going to college. This is a good thing. However, if you take the alternative, you are going to get drilled with sophisticated philosophical questions that most 35-year-olds don't even have the answer to about their own lives. Well, what happens if you fail? I mean, go ask a 35-year-old that. I don't know what happens to me if I fail, right? What happens to you if you fail? Well, what if you don't like that? Well, what if you can't get a job? You do know that all of these same questions are real for college students too, right?
And even more real in some cases,
even
right?
more real in some cases,
because you've just gone through 4 years of this system, or sometimes longer than 4 years, because the only thing better than a bachelor's degree is a master's degree, and the only thing better than a master's degree is becoming Dr. Milburn, right? Like that's got to be better, and then God forbid we have a step after that where it's like extra doctor or something. And so what happens is now you have this greater burden on you that failure is now even more egregious, or failure is the truth is, what happens when you fail? I am going to fail. That's the only honest answer to that, is I'm going to fail, and I'm going to fail a lot. I hope I don't fail so much that it ruins my life, but I hope I fail my way towards success, because tomorrow's success is paved by a whole road of yesterday's small failures, right?
Yeah, but college is like your Russell Westbrook. It's the thing that allows you to not have to think about those tough questions, because you have something that people are going to worship, and you can kind of get away with being a little less critical in other areas.
So we're worshiping college in a way.
I absolutely believe that contemporary views about college, borders on the line of religious. But I want to say one more thing about the parent thing, because I don't want to paint a picture of parents as sinister. I do acknowledge that at a fundamental level, parents do want what's best for their children. But we also know that sincerity is not a substitute for truth. Having good intentions doesn't necessarily mean that you are giving good advice. But parents also have insecurities, and they also have pressures. Now,
Sean, there's a million minimal maxims here you can tweeze out and put into the show. So we do these things called minimal maxims. We'll tell you about it later. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just making a note for Sean to write this shit down.
It's all good. All right, so here's one of the things we know about failure. When a person fails, people tend to look for where we went wrong, right? We look for, who do we blame? What was the bad decision that led to this failure? What happened, right? And so one of the things that people think about when they make decisions is not just the probability of success, but what kind of answer they can give when people start asking questions, should this project go to hell, right? So that is a major driver in human behavior. Now, what happens if someone goes to college and they're unhappy with their lives? By the way, we don't have to treat this like a hypothetical. Stop talking to professors for 2 seconds. Stop listening to parents argue for college for 2 seconds, and just go talk to human beings. Go randomly walk into a Starbucks, into a Denny's, anywhere, and you will find thousands of people that complain a lot, that are unhappy, that hate their lives, and they have college degrees. So this is a reality. But no parent feels like a failure because their son went and got a degree in English or anthropology and works at Starbucks and is unhappy with his life. Because you can tell yourself a narrative that said, I did the best I could. I did my job. You can answer all the hard questions. If someone comes to you and says, why in the world is your son unhappy with his life? You can step back and say, hey, look, I raised him well. I got him into college. I sent him to a good school. It's on him. If he's not going to apply himself, or he's not going to push himself, that's on him. On the other hand,
so it's a way to abdicate responsibility in a way where you're saying, well, I've done what I can do, but for some reason the road ends at 4 years of college or whatever. That's all I can do, as opposed to like, I did all I can do up until age 14 or 18 or whatever that might be.
We have so much faith in college as the answer that it is the case that everything prior to college is oriented around getting kids to college. Like that is the conception for most parents of what their main responsibility is. I mean, yes, I prepare my child for life and so forth, but they make a lot of decisions when children are very young that are designed to put them in a position where they can get into a good college. And the assumption is that college will take care of the rest. But I would contend that failure isn't the thing that people are really afraid of, because they know they can go to college and still fail. What people really fear is failing and being alone, failing and being blamed for it. And so a lot of people will choose to take less risk and pursue dreams they don't even care about because they know that the cost is low if they fail, rather than just do something they really want to do because they know if they fail at that, they'll be alone. So one quick example.
Well, hold on. So is this why LeBron got all these garbage players on his team? So,
Yes.
So that if he wins, he can say he can take all the credit for it. Cleveland is somehow like it was him and 4 guys from down the street that I just put on the team.
Yes. College is LeBron, and LeBron is the king of lowering expectations.
But if they lose, he could be like, well, look, I drag them as far as I could, right? I know. I know you're not a LeBron fan.
Yeah, like I scored all the points. I got all these good grades. It's everyone else around me who dragged me down.
It couldn't be my fault. Like I have a triple double. It doesn't matter that Kevin Love was an independently established all-star before he played with me. It couldn't be my fault that he doesn't feel part of the team. It couldn't be my fault for not utilizing his potential and helping him feel comfortable. Even though George Hill played really great before coming to Cleveland and now he seems to be mediocre, it couldn't be because all I want to do is run isolation plays where I kick the ball out to the open three-point shooter and I reduce everyone to Cal Korver. No. I have a triple-double. So that makes me immune from criticism. I should stop because I'm probably going to offend more people with my comments on LeBron than on college.
I'm just thinking there are 4 people listening to this podcast who are going nuts over these basketball analogies.
They're really so we
and
got
all 4 of them are loving it right now.
There's about a million people who listen to this 2 or 3 million a month that listen to this podcast, and I'm thinking that maybe 17 of them appreciate the basketball analogy.
Right.
So I apologize, and I will stop until Utah beats Houston in this series. All right.
So let's say that. Let's say there's a girl that you want to date, you're in love with her, and your mom disapproves. Your mom says, stay away from Sandy, she's a bad girl, blah, blah, blah. I completely disapprove. And you say, Mom, I'm going to follow my heart. And so you date Sandy, and one day you and Sandy get into an argument. And you go to your mom for advice, and you say, Mom, Sandy and I are in this argument about this. She sees it this way, I see it that way. Do you think your mom's going to respond to that by saying, well, look at it from Sandy's perspective. I mean, there's more than... No. What she's going to say is, I told you to stay away from that girl, right? I told you to stay away from that girl. This is the cost of doing things that other people think you shouldn't do.
Right.
The cost is when you have struggles, people won't have any sympathy for you. I know stories, no need for me to name names, but I know stories of parents who've said to their children, if you opt out of college... And sometimes it's for Praxis. Sometimes it's to start their own business and do other things that you get no help from me. Okay. If you struggle to pay a bill or whatever it may be, you get no help from me. You go to college, I'll pay. Now, it's the right of the parents to do whatever they want to do with their money. So I can't hate on that. At the end of the day, you're not obligated to give your money to another adult if you don't want to.
Right. The parents can also burn their money right in front of their child if they want.
If they want to, right.
Seems like the worst approach though to help someone.
Yeah. I mean, so that's the hard part about doing unconventional things is it does have a greater social cost. And if you fall on your face, people won't sympathize with you because they will say, well, you're experiencing all the things I warned you about. Right. On the other hand, if you go to college and you hate your life, but you followed the rules, you did what you were told, you followed the existing map, you can have all the struggles in the world and people will listen to you and they will accept as the explanation for your struggles that, yeah, life is hard, life is unfair. Let's see what we can do to cope with this. And those kinds of things play a huge role in not only the advice that parents give to their children, but also on the decisions that children make.
So how do we help someone cope with that? If they got parents telling them, hey, we are here for you. We're going to help you as long as you go to college. If you do anything different than that, you've got nothing from us. So how does someone, I guess, do you have any advice on how someone could trust in themselves a little bit in taking that step? How can they look at life and say, you know what? I don't need my parents' help. I can totally try this on my own and I'm willing to take that risk. Because the example that you gave in that situation, it would be very hard for me to not go along with college.
Sure. So I believe the solution is radical self-honesty. I'm pretty non-dogmatic about this. I don't think there's anything wrong with accepting help from your parents. I don't think there's anything wrong with being 25 years old and living in your mom's basement. We always make fun of that guy, right? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You get to decide what your priorities are in life, all right? And you have relationships with people, and if those people want to help you and you're cool with accepting that help, I don't have a problem with that. I don't feel the need to hold myself as a judge over your life. So I think the solution is to be real with yourself about what you want, take ownership of your path, and don't be a victim about it. So here's what I mean. If you decide that what's most important to you is to have the financial assistance of your parents, I say that's cool. I will not despise you. I'm not under the impression that everybody ought to move out and support themselves when they're 18. If you've got parents that can provide for you and you want to benefit from that so that you can use it as leverage for other things, go for it. However, don't be a victim about it, because what comes along with taking other people's money is playing by their rules, or at least considering their opinion when it comes to how you're going to use the money, right? Like my dad used to tell me, you can't expect me to bail you out financially every time you fail, but I get to have no opinions about the choices that you make with my money. It's just like in business. If I accept an investor's money, I have to consider some of their opinions about how to run the business. There may be limitations to that, but
if you're playing a sport, you have to realize there are rules in place, and you can't create new rules all of a sudden that make the game more advantageous for you. And the same is true in life. If someone else is creating the game, so to speak, then you better be playing by their rules.
Absolutely. And there are too many people out there who fail to acknowledge trade-offs. They make choices that involve prioritizing something like security over passion, and then they try to turn it around and play victim with that. I say, no. If you're 25 and your mom is paying your bills, you are not a victim if she wants to tell you what time you should come home. I'm sorry, I know you're 25, but you're living in your mom's house,
right?
Okay? She gets to decide what the rules are for her house. And if you want that independence, then go pay for your own. And if you don't want to, no problem, but don't be a victim about what you're choosing. On the other hand, if you want to have independence, then you have to understand that in every context, in every time period, freedom has never been free. Freedom is not something that another person can give you. Freedom is something that you have to take. That doesn't mean you have to be disrespectful about it. You can disagree with people without being disrespectful. I've always taken ownership of my life and followed my dreams, but that doesn't mean I got to call you names in order to do so, right? If I disagree with my parents, that doesn't mean I have to say, well, you're stupid, Dad, I'm going to live my life. No, I can say, Pops, I see it differently, but I love you, man. You're still going to be my best friend, and I'm never going to let you disown me, because I'm going to be over here visiting you and calling you every day and telling you that I love you 100 times a day. But these are my dreams. And if I end up living a life that I regret, you don't have the magical ability to jump inside of my body and experience my regrets for me. So I got to do me, but you're still my man. And if you think I'm wrong, maybe you're correct. Just pray for me. Be patient with me as I work out my own path in the same way that you did. But I'm not going to argue with you. I love you too much. Give me a hug. I'm going to be rude in the form of loving you in spite of the fact that you're trying to argue with me. So you don't have to be disrespectful in order to disagree. But if you want independence, then you've got to take ownership of your life. And you can't just say, I want to do what I want to do, but you got to be willing to take responsibility for paying the price necessary to do that. So that's how you do it. Be honest with yourself. Do you want independence? Do you want the freedom to do what you want to do? And are you willing to pay the cost for that? If so, that's the only way you can be free. If not, then choose your path and be honest with yourself about it.
No, Ryan, I imagine there are some folks here who are listening to this right now whose parents will tell them, or there are a lot of parents listening to this who are saying, but to tell my kid not to go to college is irresponsible. That's the irresponsible thing to do. Is that not true?
I would just challenge that and say it's irresponsible to give your kids only one option.
Yeah.
But what do you think, TK?
It is absolutely irresponsible to give your kids only one option, because that doesn't prepare them for reality. That's not true with anything. Okay. And we shouldn't pretend that it magically becomes true just because we're talking about the religion of college. Secondly, it needs to be made clear that there is nothing cool or creative or praiseworthy about not choosing the status quo. Okay. There are a lot of ways you can waste away your potential and live stupidly, even if you opt out of college. Right. So you can opt out of college and just sit around and watch SpongeBob reruns all day, that doesn't mean you're cool, right?
Yeah.
So it's always a compare to what sort of question. So I'm not of the belief that it's automatically some good praiseworthy thing if you choose not to do college. There are too many people that give themselves free passes for being cool just because I don't do what my boring dad does. Yeah, but you don't do anything at all, right? Like at least your dad does something. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I would say if as a parent, you genuinely believe it would be irresponsible of you to do college, here's a soft suggestion I can make. I can say, all right, let's assume that college is the right thing. Let's assume that it's necessary. Instead of sending your child straight from high school to college, after living 17, 18 years of you making most of the major decisions for them never providing for themselves or any of that, if you're going to finance their college career or whatever, make a deal with them and say, for 1 year, before you go to school, because I don't want you to go there and experiment and fool around and use college as a highly expensive party, right? Let's take a year and I want you to get a part-time job so you can have some responsibility, so that you know what it's like to work for somebody else, so that you know what it's like to experience some of those challenges. I want you to pick 1 or 2 places that you want to visit. I want you to see the world and experience something other than your neighborhood. Okay. And then we'll sit down and we'll talk at the end of that, let's say 6 to 12 month period, about what you want to do, what I want you to do, and we'll go from there. And even if your child goes to college after a year of that, they will get more value out of their college experience because they will have the kind of self-knowledge that can only come from engaging the marketplace and having some real responsibilities and seeing the world. And once they go inside that little bubble, the bubble that's not reflected by anything in the real world, that is a college campus, they will be able to navigate that bubble with a greater deal of intelligence and nuance, and they'll get more out of their classes because you learn more about the ideas you study when you have real world experience to weigh it against. That's a soft compromise.
You learn how to ask better questions too. And I think that's the real learning experience, not being regurgitated to or just following the syllabus. The syllabus can be great. It's a plan, just like taking a year off is sort of creating your own syllabus for a life of anti-status quo, even if you do decide that, hey, maybe that traditional path is the right path for me because I want to be a brain surgeon, right? And in order to be a brain surgeon, I have to go to college, unless you're in Cuba.
Yeah,
perhaps.
I would never let... I would never let anyone touch my brain who has not been to school to learn how to touch my brain.
on an episode of Office Hours, Isaac and I had a question once where someone wanted to know what they should do because their child really didn't want to go to college and they really wanted them to go. And one of the things I suggested, and this is something that's useful for parents, is to treat your money like you're an investor. And if your child doesn't want to go to college, say, okay, pitch me. I get to do what I want to do with my money. If you want my money and you want my support, sell me on it. I want you to take some time, think about why you want to do what you want to do, and give a presentation to your mother and I, your father and I, showing us how you plan on using the next 6 to 12 months, why you think that will benefit you, and we'll see if we're convinced. This is a pretty easy compromise that actually puts pressure on the child. They now can't use you as an excuse for not having the guts to do what they want to do, right? They now can't say, oh, mom, dad, you're not supporting me because I want to do this and you're getting mad. Now they actually have to think critically about what they want to do and how they're going to use it. And you get to give them fair treatment. So I think that's a soft compromise. By the way, I think you should do that for your kids who want to go to college.
No, that's great, man. It's like a mini episode of Shark Tank.
I'd love to flip that too. What if, because it can strengthen the parents' argument, what if the parents also had to give a proposal to the kid, like, here are the 3 options, here's why college is the best option for you. And
that would be great.
I think that, you talk about being a responsible parent, saying here are the options and here are the pros and the cons to these 3 options. I'm not just giving you one option. By the way, the 4th option is pick your own option. You tell me what is the best idea of the route you want to take.
Yeah, the ultimatum of you go to school or you don't get my help, like that's terrible. That is a terrible approach. I do want to talk about Brianna changing her state.
Okay.
So how is Brianna gonna stop this tornado? We've talked about school and about how she should, maybe look at school a little bit differently in her approach to college, but college to me sounds like you said, it's this exit ramp for her. So what else besides college? How else can she change her state? Do you think, man? I think the first thing I thought of was getting clear on what her values and beliefs are, just so she can kind of get a good compass on where she's going to go. But the second thing is, and this is to anyone who is finding themselves in this trouble, is, dude, I don't think you are a fan of these, but like, I love aptitude tests, and not just one aptitude test. I would love to sit here and say, oh, well, you know what, Sean, we're gonna put a link to the perfect aptitude test in the show notes. That's not how it works. There are so many online. You can just search for aptitude tests and take different tests, just to kind of give Brianna specifically an idea of what she wants to run towards. What do you think about aptitude tests, man? Are they completely insane, or do you think like they're a useful tool?
I don't think they're completely insane. I think they're a useful tool so long as they are used in conjunction with engaging reality. I'm not the biggest fan of using surveys, personality tests, and all these sorts of things as a way of knowing who I am prior to or independent of getting out there and experimenting with reality in a courageous and playful way. At the end of the day, you can't know there until you go there, right? You can rack your brain, you can do a bunch of exercise, and you can say, well, maybe I need to do this, maybe this is where I fit. But at the end of the day, you gotta give it a try. And I think we've attached so much drama to the decisions people make that we put all sorts of pressure on ourselves to come up with some knockdown argument that we're going to like what we choose to do before we choose to do it. Take that pressure off. You don't know if you're going to like it. You don't even need to like it. All you need to do is pursue an experience that gives you a little bit more leverage and that gives you the opportunity for self-discovery. That's all you need.
Absolutely. I'll tell you one way I did that, man, and this is the next thing I have on the list, is once Brianna has some ideas of, okay, maybe I do want to be a brain surgeon. Great, let's go with the brain surgeon thing. Should she go to school and just start schooling, taking classes for being a brain surgeon? Like, I certainly wouldn't recommend that. What I did when I was in the corporate world, anything that I found appealing, any profession I found that maybe I wanted to jump to, I would seek people out who were in that profession. Like, one example is there is a gentleman who runs the Better Business Bureau. He's the CEO of the Better Business Bureau in Dayton. And yeah, I reached out to him. I kind of had some interactions with him a little bit here and there with networking events. But I sent him an email like, hey man, I really think that I would like to be a CEO of a nonprofit organization. Better Business Bureau at the time seemed like maybe it would be a good fit for me. So I sent him an email asking to take him out to lunch and just kind of talk about what it was like being the CEO of the Better Business Bureau. I found out pretty quickly I don't want to be the CEO of the Better Business Bureau. But through that interaction, it saved me so much, headache, as if I were to just, all right, I'm going to, you know what? That's a cool position. I'm going to leave my job now and I'm going to start pursuing that. Imagine the headache I would have caused myself when I eventually got to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, I don't want to do this. So with Brianna,
4 to 8 year commitment to figuring out if you like something, that's expensive, man.
Yeah, no doubt.
Figured out in half an hour.
Exactly. Yeah. So Brianna, that's another way she can change her state too. Because right now she is stuck, man. She is in a tornado, and for me, the only way to get out of this, to get out of a tornado, the tornado that I was stuck in, it was to change my state radically. That's why I had a packing party where I packed everything up and unpacked things as I needed it, just to really, just help me to change my state. Another way that Brianna can definitely help herself out is, dude, she's got to avoid hanging out with people who don't support her. Like, I don't know what her association's like, but I'll tell you, like, if she isn't associating with people who are encouraging her to explore other opportunities, people who are not encouraging her to leave her job, people who are not there for her to build her up, she's got to be able to change that. That is, to me, like one of the biggest things. Anyone who is experiencing a crazy lifestyle or a crazy tornado. I think
support doesn't mean just like placating either.
No, it's
right?
not just saying yes all the time.
It means challenging as well, but challenging in a way that is building them up as opposed to tearing them down.
Absolutely. She's got to avoid any. Here's the thing, man. When I was in a tornado, I had developed all these bad habits that helped pacify myself. While I was in this, I would come home and I would do my drugs, or I would sit there and drink a 6-pack, or I'd do both. And it was like this really, really easy way for me to unwind, to like go from this world that I hated to get to this world where I felt like, okay, like I don't hate living so much. And bad habits were man, it kind of kept me stuck. It kept that tornado going.
Yeah. It sounds to me like what you're saying is remove the pacifiers, because one of the things that you can be appreciative of where you're at, and TK is saying Brianna needs to be appreciative of this, but also you don't necessarily need to be contented by it. And I would say that you don't want to be fully contented by it, and clearly she's not. But you don't want to be just comfortable enough that you're not willing to make a change to whatever the next best thing is.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing for Brianna here is she has to come up with a plan, and whether that is reaching out to people in professions that she is interested in, or taking aptitude tests, or coming up with a plan to save money so she can have a nice exit plan and have a safety net. I think for Brianna here, or anyone else who's in this is experiencing something like this, you've got to come up with a plan. But what's the most important part of a plan? It's taking the action, taking massive action towards bringing that plan to fruition. So Brianna, you've got to find a way to change your state, and you've got to find a way to take massive action. I know I'm totally ripping both those things off from Tony Robbins, but
still like an artist, man.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
You know, I would say too, there is nothing quite like freeing up your creative energy from the pressing urgencies and emergencies that make it seem like it's impossible to make a positive shift. And I know this might sound like very unromantic, unsexy, unglamorous advice, but even if you can make a sideways step into a different hotel, right? Like I heard a comment in there about management, so I'm not exactly sure what the issue is, but just because you work in a hotel doesn't mean you work at a hotel that's the easiest and most enjoyable place to work at, okay? And just because you go to a different hotel doesn't mean you're committing to working in hotels for the rest of your life. But if you already have experience and connections in that industry, it could be the path of least resistance to go to a different hotel, if that's an option for you, and perhaps work in an environment that's less stressful. And just by being in an environment that's less stressful, you might free up some energy to think about what else you want to do, and you can have a little bit more time to approach that process patiently. So to talk about Tony Robbins, one of the things he says is most self-help and motivational speakers start with changing your thoughts, right? They start with like adjust your attitude and think more positively and constructively. But he starts with the body and the environment. Because if you make changes in your physiology and you make changes in your environment, that can more readily facilitate the mental changes as well. So I think one of the easiest ways to, create a different mental state is to find a sideways step you can make that puts you in a different environment where you got different influences and demands.
That sounds like such I don't want to say an easy approach, but a manageable approach, meaning Brianna could pick one thing. Maybe it's her time. Maybe because she mentioned that she doesn't have time to look for another job. So maybe she just starts there and says, I need to take a sideways step just so I can have more time to think about what the hell I want to move to next.
To take those aptitude tests.
Absolutely. Right. Take time. Yeah, exactly. So no, I love that, man. Because often, like you said earlier, we kind of get this idea of what perfect is and how we need to obtain perfect. And if that's our goal, it's going to be very hard to go from like in Brianna's situation, she's in a tornado. It's not perfect. She hates where she's at. When she leaves this role, she's not stepping into this next perfect situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Brianna, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Everything That Remains. It was Ryan's and my story about walking away from careers that we hated. We didn't just quit our jobs and start a blog and everything worked out great. There was a lot of pain and heartache, and there was certainly a valley there and there were a lot of small changes and iterations that we had to make in our own lives, and especially in changing our habits. And I think you'll particularly find valuable the 8th chapter, which is about changing some of those habits. So it's called Everything That Remains. It's my favorite thing that we've ever written of our 3 books. Actually, it's my favorite thing we've ever created. Sean, if you could reach out to her, send her the audio book, or if you want the book or ebook, we'd be happy to send you those as well. Our next question is from Daniel in Pennsylvania.
I'm a Army vet who went through a 1-year divorce that led me down a dark path of drinking and overeating and online shopping, almost getting a high, like feeling when I won the bid on eBay. Before I knew it, I had a room full of all this stuff with no purpose. That was a huge point in my life, and after a few months of decluttering and eating healthy, I finally feel like I got my life back in order. However, I'm about to start college in my GI Bill. So I was wondering if there was any tips or tricks about organizing myself in college and just, college in general. Just any help from you guys would be great.
So someone has chose to go to college.
Yeah, so I think chosen is the past participle of choose.
I love how you guys are saying so TK, we're gonna accept the premise that he's already going to college.
He's already accepted college.
Well, here's so actually the first thing that I thought when I heard this is congratulations, you found your valley. That I wrote that down here because we all have these inciting incidents, and for Daniel it was like getting out of the army and then having this 1 year drawn out divorce, but then after that it produced, what was the aftermath of this crash? It was drinking. It was not reading. I actually like that he could tell not reading is not something people would usually list as part of their valley, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, that I was just impressed. You're like, my life was shitty because I wasn't reading as much as I wanted to. Like that shows me actually some of your priorities are in a really good place here. And then you talked about getting the eBay high, the online shopping, and yeah, it's true that you do get this dopamine rush. But that high does not last far past the checkout line, right? And we all, Ryan and I aren't against consumption. We all need to have some stuff. We're all wearing clothes right now, except for Ryan. He's just wearing a loincloth as we're recording this. It was very awkward.
I'm a real minimalist.
And you've got this this desire to continue to consume, though, because we feel this that felt good. We're chasing the dragon, right? It's the same thing you do with drinking. You do it with shopping. It's a different type of consumption. And GI Bill, that's free money for college. And so he has some free money here to play with, but everything that's free isn't necessarily free, right? Because we have to consider our other resources. You're giving up your time, your attention. You're giving up a portion of your life to go to this. And so yes, first thing I'll say is go back and listen to the last question. We talked a lot about college there, but how do we accept the premise that he's decided to go to college, and
how does he make this a meaningful college experience?
Yeah.
So I mean that could be how does he make a meaningful college experience while he's there? How can you go about picking the right major? I mean, do we need to talk about his approach to going to college at all, or are we?
Maybe we say, okay, well, this would be useful for people who are already in college, because just because you're there doesn't mean you have to stay either.
Sure.
I mean, that's the other thing to think about. We have these sunk costs of, well, I've already put in 2 years, right? I already have 20 credit hours
and $40,000 worth of debt,
right? So of course I need to get another $120,000 worth of debt, and of course I need to finish this out because I need that piece of paper. And the question is that true, right? And I don't know. I mean, if Daniel were here in the room, I would have some more questions for him.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, because even though he does have this opportunity to go to college for free, the question is, what is he going to do with that piece of paper once he has it? Because if it's a liberal arts degree, there are only so many things you can do with that, right? Or that degree is going to be specifically geared towards. How does he choose what major he's going to go into? Because I think that's the first step, right? Like, he's decided, I got this free money, I'm going to go to college.
Right, but what if I said, here, Ryan, here's $30,000. I'm giving you $30,000 to go to clown school for the next 12 months.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I probably would go because I think clowning is cool, but I understand what you're saying. No, I understand exactly what you're saying, man. Like, if you give me $30,000 to be here's $30,000, you can get your associates in accounting. Like, yeah, I would not take that for free just because you gave it to me.
Right, because that's not something that is going to necessarily.
How does the GI Bill work? So is he pigeonholed? Is Daniel pigeonholed into going to college with this GI Bill?
Well, no, you can't force someone to go to college. But
I mean, is this the government playing
they
mom?
They just won't sympathize with him if he ever
right. So is this mom or dad who's looking at Daniel and saying, "We'll help you as long as you go to college"? I mean, is that kind of the? I guess I'm a little ignorant on how the whole GI Bill thing works.
Yeah. So it's he's an Army vet, and to sort of as compensation, partial compensation for a service, they will give you money toward college, the same way that the corporation that we worked for gave you a certain amount of money to go to college.
Yeah, it's funny. I I started going to college because the corporation Josh and I worked at, they paid for it. And I was like, I'd be stupid not to go to school. And what I found myself doing was working 60, 70, sometimes 80 hours a week and going to school. And it was not a sustainable schedule. And when it was over, I was so happy. But to your point, I don't do shit with that degree now.
Yeah.
And I did it just because
you're supposed to.
And and it was paid for.
Well, and you were encouraged to, right? So I think sometimes TK's nodding his head here, like, yeah, everyone encourages people to go to college. And
in fact, the myth is much more powerful than that. A really powerful myth is one that you don't even have to teach. The curriculum is invisible. It's built into the very expectations, the very structures of our society. It's the default. It's not even questioned. It's not even thought about. It's not even looked at as a decision. It's just what you do. So people aren't encouraged to go to college. They know by the time they're 12 that is what they're going to do, because that is how life is oriented for them. So it's more powerful than just being told that's what they ought to do.
Yeah.
So what do we do for Daniel here? He's an Army vet. He has found his valley. Now, I say valley. There are other valleys out there, and there are deeper valleys. You could be on heroin. It
can always be worse. You could be dead.
Yeah, but hopefully this is sort of the nadir for you. And now the question is, what is the appropriate peak for you? Maybe it's college. And by the way, the college experience is certainly better than the sitting at home drinking, online shopping, and not reading. We can agree that just because there's one peak over here doesn't mean it's the highest peak on the landscape. So what is the appropriate peak for Daniel here? And what questions would you be asking him right now if he were in the room?
Mm-hmm. So first, for those who are listening that might be considering going to college, or for those who are considering the sunk cost that you referenced a minute ago, it's important to make the distinction between transaction costs and opportunity costs, right? Transaction cost refers to what we might call price tag costs, right? What our receipts indicate after we're done with the experience, the amount of money I spend on gas, the price of the movie ticket and the popcorn and the candy that I buy. But that's just one kind of cost. But since it's the most visible, the most obvious, that's the one we pay attention to. And typically when we say something is free, we mean there is an absence of transaction costs, or rather, more accurately, I'm not the one that's paying the transaction costs. But there's also opportunity costs. And opportunity costs refers to the value of the best alternative that you have to forego in order to do what you want to do. So if I say, hey, you guys want to come to the movies with me this Saturday night? I'm paying. That means, and I'm picking you up. No transaction costs for you guys. However, there is an opportunity cost. You've got to give up whatever you were going to do or could have been doing with that Saturday night. Now, obviously, going to the movies with me, that's as good as it gets, right? But the question you have to ask yourself is, what are my opportunity costs? Nothing is free. If you're going to give up 1, 2, 3, 4 years of your life, you got to ask yourself, not just is it free financially, but is this the best thing that I could be doing with my time? Is this the most leverage that I can gain for my time? And that leads us to a more fundamental question, because ultimately I believe how you create a meaningful experience, the fundamentals are the same. Doesn't matter if it's college, attending a party, going on a date. The way you create a meaningful experience begins with a single question, and that is, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Mm-hmm. Right? You don't go to a gym to get in shape in general. Why do you want to get in shape? Why are you going to the gym? What do you want to get? And that's the question I would start with. And that's more fundamental than what I should major in, or how many credits I should take. Why are you going to college? And you can't let your answer be because someone else is paying for it. That's not a good reason to do anything. The last thing I'll say on this is, whatever you do, if you're going to go to college, please, please, please don't let I went to college and I got my degree in ABC, XYZ be the most interesting thing about you. Because if it is, you're gone. You're gone. That has to be less interesting than how you are using the knowledge and experience you gain along the way. I said that was the last thing, but I lied. Here's the last thing. Abandon the permission-based mindset. Abandon the preparation mindset that says life works in the following fashion. I spend a bunch of time preparing myself for the real world, and then once I'm sufficiently prepared, I get a degree or I take enough classes, then I'll go out there and I'll create value. No, you learn how to create value by creating value. Learning, according to Chalmers Brothers, is the process of doing what you don't know how to do while you don't know how to do it. not after you learn how to do it. It's doing what you don't know how to do at the same time as not knowing how to do it. That's how you learn to raise a child. That's how you learn to build a business. That's how you learn everything that you learn in life. And so if you're going to go to college, once you've identified your why, what is the thing you want to create? What's the lifestyle you want to develop? Start investing in that right now in terms of creative action, whether that's starting a podcast, starting a blog, starting a small side business. Doesn't matter if you fail. What matters is that you're starting, that you're experimenting, that you're putting yourself out there.
I totally agree, man. I think the best takeaway for me from those 3 points, man, are it's the one about if you're going to college just because it's paid for. That's the worst reason to go to college.
Yeah.
So Daniel, if that's the reason why you're going to college, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but ask that question, why are you at college? There has to be more than just, well, I'm getting it paid for, so I'm here.
And you can factor that in.
And I'm going through the motions. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if that's one, it should be one of the factors. Like, what does this thing cost? But
Sure.
then what are the other costs? We're talking about the opportunity cost, the price tag, the transactional cost isn't the only cost. We always talk about that with our material possessions. Like, there's the cost of storing the thing, the space the thing takes up, cleaning the thing, worrying about the thing, taking care of the thing, watering the thing, whatever it is. There are all these other costs, and it's way beyond, oh yeah, but the government's going to pay for it. I'd be dumb not to do it. We got to go beyond that. So TK, what do you, when you work with people who are in Daniel's situation, and you just talked about some of the creative endeavors to embark on, what are some of the real world practical applications there that someone can do? Because to me, I always say creating is far more important, far more valuable, far more meaningful than consuming. But and creating can be anything. It can be beginning to write that book you wanted to write. Creating can be singing a song. It can be this whole number of things. But what is something that's going to put Daniel down a meaningful path now? What are some steps that he can take?
So start with identifying something that you're curious about. Secondly, identify some problems you can solve for real people by exploiting that curiosity. And 3, find some real people and pitch them on the opportunity to solve their problems. Or, without even asking for permission, figure out a way to try to solve their problem. And instead of saying, can I do this? Say, hey, here's something that I did. So for instance, I have a participant who is interested in photography, right? And initially started out saying, I want to study this, I want to learn this. And the approach was, I'm going to take a bunch of classes and I'm going to get good at this. And I said, how about you start with people who don't have nice photos? Okay, there are plenty of real human beings out there, many of whom who don't have a good looking headshot.
Yeah. Go look at their Twitter profile.
Go look at their Twitter profile and go up to them and say, hey, I'm trying to get some experience. I'm trying to experiment with different ways of taking pictures. I'm trying to build my portfolio. What do you think if I took family photos of you? Or what do you think if I, took headshots? And my initial suggestion was come up with like a cheap price that you wouldn't be mad about, asking for, maybe like $25, $50, something like that. And if they say no, be willing to do it for free anyway, because at the end of the day, you're getting the experience. You don't have like the alternative. And that was a completely different mindset from I'm going to buckle down and for 2 years, I'm going to study photography. Like, no, start right now with whatever skill you have, even if that means you're going to make mistakes, and solve problems with that skill or solve problems with that interest for real people. You can always do that at every stage.
What you're talking about right now is entrepreneurship. And I'm thinking of this essay I printed off from Seth Godin here. It's a really short one. Entrepreneurship is not a job. And here's what he said. He said, you don't apply, you don't get a salary, no one picks you. So think about this. The person you're talking about who wanted to be the photographer, they didn't wait. Well, I'm just going to wait around until someone picks me. I'll go study and then I'll put up a website and hopefully someone will come pick me. No. An entrepreneur, you don't apply, you don't get a salary, no one picks you. Bragging about how much money you've raised or what your valuation is a form of job thinking. Entrepreneurship is a chance to trade a solution to someone who has a problem that needs solving. Solve more problems, solve bigger problems, solve problems more widely, and you are an entrepreneur. It's tempting to industrialize this work, to make it something with rules and bosses and processes, but that's not the heart of an entrepreneur. The work is to solve problems in a way that you're proud of. And I think that last part is also important. So we're talking about what you're proud of. Well, yeah, the question that Ryan asked before, and we always ask, is what are your values? Identifying what your values are, because that's going to be something that you're proud of. You can go back and listen to episode, I think it was 69, our values episode, and we identify these different types of values, your foundational values versus your core values versus minor values versus imaginary values. That's the big one we all get stuck on, right? Like a job title is an imaginary value, right? And identifying what your values are, because if you know what your values are, then you can start solving problems in a way that aligns with your values and helps other people. And that's the way that you're going to create a business. It's the way you're going to create a meaningful life. That's the way that you're going. And by the way, it doesn't mean you're creating your own business. If you're working for someone else, what are you doing? You're helping that company, that other person, the small business, whoever it may be, you're helping them solve problems as well.
Yeah.
You can reverse engineer your understanding of what your values are too by simply observing your behavior and working backwards to identify what underlies your tendency to do certain things even when you aren't being incentivized by money. What are the things you're always consistent at? What are the things you never flake on? Economists call this revealed preference versus stated preference. There's a huge gap between those two things because for starters, our stated preference don't have any cost. We can say what we desire, what we love, what we value for free. There's no risk associated with it.
Ryan and I call those lip service priorities.
Yeah, lip service priorities.
Like, my health is my priority. I haven't been to the gym in 4 months and I eat like crap. Or my relationships are priority, but I'm working 80 hours a week and I forsake my wife and my parents and the people closest to me. Yeah. Or I say creativity. For me, it was always writing was my priority. Right? I'm really passionate about writing, but I was just an aspiring writer. I aspired every damn day of my life, but didn't put any words on paper until I got serious about making it a true priority.
Absolutely. And your behavior showcases your revealed preferences. What do you actually do once we introduce scarcity and sacrifice back into the equation? That tells me something significant about you. And here's the crazy thing. So you take the example of the person you mentioned who says I love family, but they work 80 hours a week, right? I don't think the solution to that is necessarily to say, hey, quit being a hypocrite and work for 40 hours a week and go spend more time with your family. No. It's to say, hey, man, maybe we should take a look at the fact that you spend 80 hours a week working and own the fact that that's what's most important to you. Because as long as you're lying to yourself about how much you love work, as long as you're feeling guilty about the fact that you enjoy being at your job more than you enjoy being around your family, you're going to go about this in the least productive way.
Isn't that interesting? Because we demonize working in a way, like because we don't demonize the other things. Where you never have a guy where you're like, you know what, you're just spending too much time with your family. It's not something that, and I think the same is true with college, right? We don't tell someone like, you know what, you are just spending too much time at college as a 19-year-old, and you'd be better served doing X, Y, Z. Like, it's taboo to say that. The truth is let's just step back and be honest about what the circumstances are, what the behaviors, the revealed preferences are in our own lives.
Yeah, and when you're honest with that, it actually paves the way for you to find a way to pursue it that's more consistent, that's more congruent, that's more compatible with your other interests. You are never better off by lying to yourself, because lying to yourself divorces you from reality and it makes you an inferior critical thinker. But when you tell yourself the truth, even if that truth seems politically incorrect at first, even if it seems shameful at first, you now have the advantage. You now can pursue it in a way that's characterized by self-ownership. And everything is better that way. Every family is different. Every lifestyle is different. Every spouse doesn't get annoyed and angry when they have someone in their lives who works really hard. There are ways to do this. There is no one way to be married, no one way to approach your work life.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's say, Daniel has committed to going to school. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, DK. So how does someone create a meaningful college experience? What do you think of when you think about that? Because I know you're like, it's not that you're against college, but you do talk a lot about alternatives to college. But if someone does want to go to college, how do they make this a meaningful experience?
So what I am against is being on autopilot with your life. What I am against is doing anything in a dogmatic way that omits the importance of thinking critically, clearly, and creatively about what it is you want. You have to start with the results you want to create, right? And if you're not starting with that, then you're pursuing a purposeless aim. You're driven by maybe fitting in or doing what's comfortable. So I would say, don't hide behind college. Don't use college as a place to hide. And it's not some unfair attack on college to point out the reality that many young people do exactly this, precisely because college is about the only thing you can do where you can go disappear for 4 years, not be productive. You can party, you can clown around, you can be average. Like literally, according to college's definition of average, you can just like get C's and float by. I've done these things, okay? Many of us have done these things. And if we're not debating, we'll admit that we've done these things, okay? You can go to college, you can get C's, you can just hang out, you can be mediocre, but because you're in the right place doing the right things, you'll get praise. It's Russell Westbrook again, right? So don't hide behind that. Don't use college as a place to buy yourself time. Don't go because it's like putting life on pause for 4 years. If you're going to go anywhere or do anything, go with a deliberate aim in mind, and don't give yourself permission to take a single action step in that direction until you can answer the question, why am I doing this?
Yeah, and I think if you are deciding that college is the right route for me for whatever reason, then the reason that you should go to college if you're already going is you're going to get something out of it, right? And so whether you're just showing up to a lecture to attend the lecture and you're not going to the college and just showing up, you want to get something out of that. Because you're being forced to go to a lecture, quite often we're just like, well, I'm being forced to attendance is enough. But no, attendance isn't enough. If you're just attending for 4 years, you're not getting what you could out of this experience, right? And I agree. It's not about the social experience. It's about what am I going to learn? What skills am I going to develop while I am here? Now, we can go and look at the stats and realize that not a lot of skills are necessarily acquired during this 4-year experience, but they could be.
They could be. So I'll give a second thing because I was a little bit more abstract with my prior answer, but something that's practical, and we reinforce this a lot at Praxis, is that learning doesn't count if you're not combining it with some form of creative action, right? So one of the most important principles you can learn about learning is the value of learning out loud. Right? Documenting your journey of going from, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, to I am now a master of this particular thing. What a lot of people miss out on is the opportunity for professional branding and professional skill and professional opportunity that would come from advertising in a non-obnoxious way the things they're studying. So what most people do, for instance, at a job interview, someone says, hey, what's a positive quality about you? And a person says, well, I'm a fast learner. And then the interviewer says, well, give me an example of that. And what do people do? They tell you something that they know, right? They tell you something that they've already mastered. But telling me what you know doesn't tell me anything about what you look like and act like while you are in the process of learning, okay? And the most valuable thing for people that have to work with you is knowing what you're like when you don't know what you're doing and you're in the process of figuring it out. But most people never showcase that because they hide what they're doing from the world until they feel confident that they know what they're doing, right? And so one of the best things you can do is, if you're educating yourself, you're taking a class, is to learn out loud. Write a blog post that says, hey, I'm TK Coleman. I know nothing about astrophysics, but I watched this Neil deGrasse Tyson video on YouTube the other day, and it really sparked some curiosity. So I never paid attention to physics class in high school, but I'm going to start teaching myself the basics. So I ordered this 2nd grade physics book from Amazon, and this is what I'm going to learn. Every single week, I'm going to teach myself a couple of new concepts, and I'll document it here on the blog. At the end of 3 years, when I'm able to talk intelligently or semi-intelligently about physics, I'll have way more respect, way more notoriety, way more opportunity than the person that hid themselves in a basement while they became the physics master, and then they rear their head once they think they know what they're talking about, and they find out that no one really cares about you, man. Like, where have you been? Like, people respect that.
And they respect the creations as well. So whether it's starting a blog or writing a book about it or a podcast or whatever, they respect the fact that you've documented it some way. And by the way, that's going to make you stand out. Can you imagine the people we used to hire if they would be like, well, yes, I've been blogging about telecom for the last 3 years and about how I've learned to become a better salesman in the process. all right,
boom, hired.
You're hired.
And it makes
Thank
you better too.
Yeah.
It's not just a branding thing. You actually get more out of your learning when you have to do that.
No, it's a great concept, man. Like just thinking about, yes, like you're going to school to be a brain surgeon and you're hanging out with brain surgeons while you're going to school and you're going to meet up groups of brain surgeons. Like you're immersing yourself as much as you can outside of school to help reiterate these things that you're learning. I love that. It's funny because when I went to school, I didn't even realize I was doing that with getting my business management degree while I was a business manager. but no, it's a great approach, man. The one thing that I really want to, when I was thinking about Daniel's question here, the one thing that I want to just make Daniel aware of, and anyone else out there who is facing this question of like, how do I make college a great experience? I think it's really important to know that there's always going to be a better option. Like the worst I can see, or the worst things I see with college students, because I would hate to feel this way if I was in the middle of my degree 2 years into it and I'm like, oh man, I've been going for business management, but that brain surgeon degree looks much better and maybe I would enjoy that more. And if that person was able to switch to brain surgery, then there would probably be something else that would look appealing to them eventually. I guess this is my way of telling Daniel is whatever you do decide to do with college, commit to it and understand that there are going to be these valleys, but there are also going to be the peaks. And I think what you were saying about just kind of documenting it the whole time and being engaged as much as possible with that profession or whatever it is that Daniel's going to go and get some schooling for, like that is going to help him to stay focused and to help him stay more consistent throughout this experience for him. But
well, then how do we on the commitment part? Because I agree with that to a great extent. The commitment is important. Nothing is finished if we're not willing to commit, right? Mm-hmm. However, there will be times where we realize we're taking the wrong path.
Absolutely.
And we need to be willing to not just stick to it because we've decided to commit to that thing if it is the wrong path. We're like, oh crap, I've climbed too far up the corporate ladder for me to jump down now. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just going to keep climbing, I guess. And so we do need to be able to make a distinction between commitment and the willingness to walk away when it no longer serves a purpose.
Totally agree, man. Like we absolutely have to be prepared to walk away from anything.
Yeah.
And for me, and this might be different for you, TK, but for me, it's when there are certain paths I go down and I realize like, oh, like this is not only this is a net negative, meaning that, all the angst and the valleys that I go through, the peaks that I get out of it, it's not worth all these valleys. But the other thing too is if it doesn't align with those values, if it doesn't align with my beliefs, like that is, for me, that is when that bifurcation becomes very clear and I have to make a decision. What do you think, TK?
Yeah. So this is interesting. I personally think you can be as non-committal as you want to be as long as you are good at establishing expectations and maintaining frame. Let me give you an example. Let's say
that's a great maxim, Sean.
Oh man, I'm going for the maxim record. What's the triple double version of a maxim?
I don't know, but you've already hit it. You've already set the bar, man.
I'm the Russell Westbrook of the Minimalist podcast. Dude.
That's right, dude.
I'm going for the triple double here. I got 9 assists. I need one more. 9
no, but
expound
on that, man. It's great, dude.
Yeah. So let's say I owe you $200. Okay. And one day I come up to you and I say, hey man, I just wanted to give you this $100 here, and I give you that $100. I owe you $200. How do you feel?
I feel like, all right, thanks for paying me half the money back.
Yeah.
When am I going to get the other half?
Okay. Yeah. So it sounds like you feel a little bit confused.
Yes, definitely.
And borderline annoyed.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's fair.
All right. Let's change it up now.
Okay.
Let's say I don't owe you anything. Mm-hmm. And I come up to you and I say, hey man, I really appreciate you guys having me on the Minimalist the other day, and you guys have had a positive impact on my life, and I just wanted to share a little bit of appreciation, brother. Here's $25. Let's not argue about it. Just take the money. I want to show you some love. How do you feel now?
Yeah, sure. I'd say thanks, man. Thanks for the $25.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So in the first scenario, I gave you $100 and you were unhappy with me.
Right.
In the second scenario, I only gave you $25. And I'm the man in your eyes, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not how much you give or what you do. It's about the framework of expectations that I'm operating in, right? In the first scenario, there was an expectation that I would give 200. So when I gave you a lot, it still came up short. In the second scenario, you didn't have any expectations. And when I gave you a little, it came up looking long. So when it comes to commitments, I think where most people go wrong is they feel the need to commit to something other than their curiosity. And they say things like, for the next 5 years, I'm going to do this. It's kind of like what you talked about, the paleo guy. I now brand myself as the paleo guy. And for the rest of my life, my religion is going to be this thing. I mean, people don't explicitly say that, but when they leave it so vague, so undefined, that's what it feels like, right? If I say something like, I'm going to start a new podcast and it's going to be about this. Well, now you kind of expect it to be for the rest of my life. And when I stop, what do you do? You say, well, what happened to that podcast?
Yeah.
But we don't do that.
Wrong.
Yeah, but we don't do this with TV shows because TV shows know how to control the frame. They say this is season 1 and there are 10 episodes. So when we stop doing them, don't ask any questions. The season is over. And we let you know at the last episode, this is the finale. It's over, right? So it's all about controlling that frame. Now, when we talk about things like taking on a new task or learning something, I think we have this default where we feel like the first response to a curiosity ought to be to sign up for some course or make a commitment. And if we're not doing that, we're not taking our curiosity seriously. And that's part of the schooled mindset. I'll give you an example of this. There was a guy who asked Isaac and I if he should take a Tai Lopez course. And if I remember the details correctly, he said it cost about $200. And he was wondering if he should, he's nervous about spending the money. Should he make the commitment? And my advice to him was go on YouTube, pull up one of Tai Lopez's free videos, okay? Watch like an hour's worth of his free videos. And then ask yourself, am I tired of this guy or do I want more?
Right.
And then you'll have your answer, right? Because if you're tired of him from 1 hour of free stuff, then you're not going to want to pay the guy $200. That's going to only end up bad. On the other hand, if you say, I want more, if he says something that moves you and changes your life, doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, watch another one. You know, take that process a little bit further and you'll know organically by experimenting with it that this is something you do or don't want. Right. And so because we have this default that says the first response to my curiosity is to make a long-term commitment, we overlook all of the free, simple, playful, least resistant ways to engage our curiosities. So I would caution against this idea that, you know, whatever it is you do, commit to it. I would say, control the frame. Say, you know what? For the next 2 weeks, I'm going to try this out.
Dip your toe in the water.
Dip your toe in the water.
Yeah. And no matter what, don't sign up for a Tai Lopez course. All right.
Well, hold on. I just want to make a point about the commitment, because what I'm saying about commitment is this, man, is that if Daniel has done the work, he has gone through the last question with Brianna. He has flirted around. He's flirted around with talking to other people in the profession. Mm-hmm. With brain surgeons, I'm just sticking with that because that's what we've been doing the whole show. Yep. And he's like, yes, like this is something that I have tinkered around with. I've engaged with. I find it entertaining. I find it engaging. I want more. I want more of this. So now I think the commitment part comes in for when it gets tough. Mm-hmm. So he goes down this path of being a brain surgeon, and then he gets his first year of residency. And he's like, man, this is really, really hard. I think to me, that's where the commitment comes in. It's after you've done the pre-work, after you've done as much as you can to choose a path for yourself, committing to that. It's like marriage. Yeah. I mean, committing to that path, college is a temporary marriage, I guess. But I guess that's what I'm really trying to say about commitment.
Don't confuse excitement with passion. And I think quite often someone gets excited about a nice idea, and then all of a sudden they actually have to put in the work. There's drudgery involved, and you have to be willing to drudge through the drudgery, is what you're saying with respect to commitment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Daniel, I'd love to send you a copy of our book, Minimalism, Live a Meaningful Life. We talked a lot about values today and finding what your values are, and that book is about just that. Ryan and I, when we first started letting go and pursuing a more meaningful life, we had to identify what our values were because we didn't know. And if you don't know what your recipe is for a more meaningful life, then how are you going to live it, right? And so I'd love to send you a copy of that. Sean, if you could reach out to Daniel, either send him the audiobook the book or the audio book. Could appreciate it. And for those of you listening to this, we'd love to hear what you have to say. So if you have a comment or tip about schooling or college or careers, including advice for any of our callers today, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839. It's my favorite part of the show. You can also send a voice memo right from your phone to podcast@theminimalists.com. At the end of each show, we air our favorite comments and tips, so stay tuned for that. Ryan, what time is it?
It is time for our lightning round where we answer questions from social media.
Yes, we do indeed. We are on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram at The Minimalists and at TK_Coleman. At least on Twitter. I know that for sure. We'll put a link to your Facebook and Instagram on the show notes as well. During the lightning round, this is where Ryan and I both do our best to each answer every question with just a short, shareable, less than 140 character response. We also put the text to these minimal maxims in the show notes so you can copy and share our pithy answers on social media if you'd like. And
so
now
we are going for the maxims now.
We are. but and also we have all of our maxims in one place, so you can find them over at minimalmaxims.com. We have people who set that up as their homepage, so there's over 1,000 of our quotes on there now. And so maybe TK, you can help us add to our collection. Where's our first question from, Ryan?
All right, our first question is from Tom. Tom writes in, I'm a student and I'm struggling with deciding on whether I should stay where I am or whether I should change to a different degree that people refer to as the better fit for me. Could you give me some tips on how to make good life/education decisions as a young adult?
So here's the thing. We'll give a pithy answer, but it doesn't have to just be pithy. We can ramble on and then tie it up with a pithy bow, right?
I do it the opposite way. I'll say pithy first, and then I ramble on.
He unpacks it.
And then I unpack it, yeah.
Here's your gift. Let me open it for you.
Right.
All right.
It's the LeBron approach. Get the triple-double stats first,
Right.
then try to win the game if you can.
Well, my pithy answer is don't confuse schooling with education. And I think really that too often we say, well, I'm going to sign up for that course. And all of a sudden, via college, I'm going to, via osmosis, have all of these things in my brain 4 years later. Or I'm going to sign up for the Ty Lopez real estate course or whatever the hell it is. And all of a sudden, just by paying the money and putting that debt on my credit card, all of a sudden I've attained all the knowledge. It doesn't work that way. Don't confuse schooling with education.
Yeah, I would just say the best person to give you advice on what's best for you is you. It's too often that we, like you were saying, man, we get these social pressures from parents, from friends, from coworkers, whatever, telling us what we should and shouldn't do, and it really it can stunt our progress in something. And for me, I'm trying to think of like this magic formula. Like, how did I get confidence to just kind of be vulnerable, to put myself out there, to take a risk on something that people told me was too risky to take a risk on? Like, I don't have a magic formula for that. But I do know that, what did you say earlier? The pithy thing you said earlier, TK, about the only way, oh man, I'm going to have to go back to the show notes and look at it. No, but you're basically talking about like the only way you can really, kind of be, we were talking about commitment. And the thing that you said about commitment, about really the way to kind of gain respect is to be consistent. I'm doing a very, very bad job of
to control the frame, to establish expectations.
Right. Yeah. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that when we use other people's expectations to run our life, it's going to make us trepidatious to do anything on our own. And there is something that we have to commit to in ourselves to take a chance to go outside of what everyone else is telling us what to do.
Don't let others' expectations dictate your decisions.
Yeah,
there's something pithy for you.
Yeah, that's good too.
Can
I'm this is part of me rambling. Go ahead.
Yeah. So regarding the whole bit about people saying you should major in this because it's a better fit for you, I would say the only way to know what a better fit is to try it on. If I hand you a pair of shoes and say, this is the best fit for you, I might be right. I might be wrong. How do you know? Not by blind faith, not by self-confidence, but by conducting a simple experiment. put on the shoes. And you will know with certainty if it's the right fit for you. So before you change your major or do anything dramatic, before you place faith in what other people say, before you dismiss them, try it out. Pull up some articles on the topic. If it's philosophy, get a philosophy book, listen to some philosophy podcasts, and then pay attention to how you feel. Does it bore the hell out of you? They were wrong. It's not the best fit for you. If it makes you say, I want more, then conduct some further experiments. Try it on for size. Keep it simple.
What's our next question?
All right, Joshua Hook. One thing I struggle with working at a university is that there are so many meetings and administrative tasks that take me away from my research and writing. But not showing up to faculty meetings or refusing to pitch in on admin would reflect poor departmental citizenship.
Well, my pithy answer here is too often we confound talking about work with meaningful work. I remember back in the corporate world, we had meeting Mondays. I had 9 hours of meetings on Monday. Like we crammed. I had the pre-meeting meeting for the first meeting, which was actually the second meeting of the day, and then from there I had a marketing meeting, a merchandising meeting. Like it just filled back to back to back meetings, and we had meetings about meetings. And after a while, you just sort of have to step back and say, okay. This is part of what I'm required to do, right? Now, I could miss those meetings, but only if I could prove that the value I'm providing is so much greater than attending those meetings. But it has to be so much greater because they put such an emphasis. They put a huge value on going to those meetings. And even though they weren't valuable, we often confuse valuable with value. The values of the corporation were that you needed to conform to these meetings. Now, of course, for me, it was like, okay, I'll spend the other 6 days a week because there are 7 days in a week. I'm going to work all 7. I'll spend the other 6 days doing something that's going to add as much value as possible, but I know I have to, it's easier for me to conform. And so the question that I think Joshua Hook has to ask himself here is it more valuable for you to conform, or can you provide enough value that you don't have to conform?
Yeah. My short answer is if you find a job you love, you'll work your ass off to keep that job. So the question is, Joshua, how much do you love this job? I mean, there are obvious administrative things that the people in the ivory tower are going to set up and make you do. The question is do you still love your job? If I loved managing people, I really loved helping people move from getting fired to becoming employee of the month. I really loved helping that person who really wanted to get that promotion and showing them the steps in order to get a promotion. I really enjoyed that level of interaction I had with people, helping them develop their career in some way. That was like 5% of my job. I mean, the other 95%, it was filled with meeting Mondays and you know, a lot of other stuff that I wasn't willing to put up with. So it wasn't a job that I absolutely loved. Joshua, if you absolutely love your job, but you got these admin things happening, like, yeah, sometimes you got to do stuff you don't want to do. Josh and I still have to pay taxes. We still have to do a lot of things that come along with being the minimalists that are administrative things that, yeah, I look at them sometimes and I'm like, what the hell are we doing? But at the end,
I have a whole list of those things I have to do today. Right. I'm like, I can outsource some of these things, but they won't get done the same way that I want to do. So am I willing to what's the decision I have to make, right? If I outsource it and realize like, okay, it's not going to get done to the level that I want it to be done, I can't outsource everything. Like sometimes I don't want to write, but I'm not going to outsource my own writing to other people, right? And so I think it's important to make that decision. Are you willing to drudge through that drudgery?
Yeah. All right, so I want to adopt an entrepreneurial approach here, because there's learning to accept the things about our work that we don't like, which is just part of being an adult. But then there's also giving ourselves the opportunity to see if we can negotiate, our possibilities. And that's always something we should at least give a fair shot at. Zig Ziglar says the best way to get what you want is to help somebody else get what they want. Your power to negotiate comes from your ability to figure out why things matter to other people, and then to take your own self-interest and present it to them in a way as if it's a segue that leads to theirs. So the first thing I would do is I would say, what does my attendance at these meetings signal? Okay. And what value does my presence at these meetings create? Don't assume that it's arbitrary. Don't assume that you're required to be here just because someone's trying to ruin your life. There's something that somebody is getting out of your attendance at these meetings that's valuable to them. You got to find out what that is and make sure your understanding is really precise. Then try to figure out a way that you can amplify that value by not being at the meeting, but doing something else instead. This is an example that doesn't perfectly apply because I don't work at a university, but I had a meeting this morning with my CEO that started at the same time as this podcast. And with great confidence, I said to him, I need to cancel our meeting because I'm going to be going on the Minimalist podcast and we're going to talk about a variety of things. One of those things will be Praxis. And he predictably said, cool. Why? Because I know what my CEO wants and I know what the purpose of the meeting is. The purpose of the meeting is for us to discuss ways that I can do my job better and ways that we can grow and promote Praxis. Me being here is actually something that allows me to do that more effectively than being at that meeting. Yes, the circumstances are unique to what I do, but that fundamental principle is the same everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's right. And we got a bunch more questions here. Unfortunately,
sorry, that wasn't lightning round.
No,
no, it's perfect.
No,
man.
that's good. We got a bunch more questions here, and here's the thing. I was going to pick one more bonus question. We had two really good ones. I knew TK was going to be here, so we have two of them here. One is from Freely. Do you have any tips to help people in their 30s and 40s find what they want to truly do with their time in order to earn a living? And the other one is from Chris. I find the field of education to be frustrating and broken. Do you have any advice for teachers considering to leave their profession? So if you want to listen to our answers to those two questions, you can tune into this week's postscript. Each week we publish a postscript episode over on the Minimalists private podcast. The Minimalists private podcast is just for our Patreon supporters. That's why it's private. So if you want to support our show and help keep this podcast 100% advertisement free, then head on over to theminimalists.com/support. In addition to our weekly postscript episodes, the Minimalist private podcast feed includes our monthly Ask the Minimalists Anything episodes, unreleased recordings from our live events, and the entire back catalog of past private episodes. And once you become a supporter, you'll receive a personal link to our private feed so that it plays in your regular podcast app, right next to the podcast that you're listening to right now. And as a Patreon supporter, you also receive access to our monthly live stream videos, as well as first access to tickets to all of our live events before those tickets are available to the general public. Find all the details and good stuff over at theminimalists.com/support. And here is a snippet from this week's postscript episode. What are the practical tips for people in their 30s, 40s, or even in their 50s that are trying to figure out what to do with their time to earn a living?
Sure. I think this is as much of a problem for people in their 30s and 40s as people in their early 20s. It's just that by the time we get to our 30s and 40s, we get a little bit better at giving up or rationalizing the choices we've made or just getting comfortable or doing things like saying, I'm just going to focus on the kids and giving them the opportunity and I'll live out my dreams through them. But this is a common thing. So number one, don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel ashamed of it. Most people in their 30s and 40s don't know how to answer this question. Second thing I would say is start small. Instead of putting pressure on yourself to find out what you feel called to do overnight, instead of putting pressure on yourself to figure out a way to make money, in the next 6 months, just start by asking yourself, what are some things you're interested in? Do the Alan Watts exercise about, what would you do if money were no object? Are there any problems that you enjoy solving? Are there any forms of value that you enjoy creating? Are there any people that you enjoy working with? Before you think about how to make money, think about what it is you want to do to create value. The third thing is start experimenting with little ways.
All right, and we're back. And if you want to hear that full conversation, you can become a patron over at theminimalists.com. Okay, now it's time for our added value portion of the show. All right, well, since we have TK here on the podcast, I do want to talk about a couple things. One is you have a podcast called Office Hours. It's with Isaac, and you have finished the first season. When's the second season coming out? Because now is the perfect time, by the way. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, but it's just Office Hours. If you listen on Overcast or Apple or wherever, you can just type in Office Hours. You can find it over there. The first season, now is a great time to go back and binge the first season. If you need career advice, they certainly answer a lot of great questions about careers, and unlike us, they keep it fairly minimal. It's succinct.
I don't know about that.
No, you guys do a great job. You answer a few questions per episode, and I appreciate what y'all do over there. So when's season 2 starting up?
Yes, so we will actually be premiering season 2 live at FeeCon. FEE is the Foundation for Economic Education. You can check out their site at fee.org. Next month, we'll be doing a live episode of Office Hours, and that will be the launch of season 2. In the meantime, get caught up on season 1.
Yeah, you can go back and take a listen, find the ones, find the questions in there that pique your interest. And also, you have another podcast, which I have not listened to, so I need to know more about it. Small Business Edge. What's that about?
Small Business Edge. It is a podcast sponsored by Ceteris. And with this podcast, we focus on franchise owners and the everyday lifestyle of CEOs. You know, lots of people are familiar with the titles that correlate with running a business, but most people don't have an idea of what the day-to-day life is like. If you're a CEO of a franchise, or you know, you're the owner of a franchise, rather, like, what do you do? What does an average Tuesday look like? We talk about those kinds of things, and we also talk about the sorts of difficulties they faced as they transition from, you know, having a career to owning a franchise. What influenced their decisions? What sorts of things they wish they knew, and what are some of what's some of the advice they give to other people who are just starting out?
Gotcha. So one other place to go that I recommend for TK Coleman, we already recommended the talk that he gave. We'll put a link to that in the show notes, but I want to put a link to his blog, which you can find over at tkcoleman.com. But specifically, this article is called A Quick Question About That Brilliant Idea You Have. And I'll just read the first paragraph here, but I'll let you all read the whole thing because it perfectly sums up the way I feel about ideas. What's so good about it if you're not acting on it? This is not only a question for artists, entrepreneurs, and other people who identify themselves as doers. It's also for philosophers, thinkers, visionaries, and self-proclaimed idea guys. If you truly find a concept to be fascinating, why not create space in your life to play with it, to experiment with it, to see where it takes you when you combine it with a little innovation? So let me ask you this. I have people come up to me we'll be at like a book tour or something, and it's one of the things that drives me crazy. We're doing a book signing at the end, we're dishing out hugs to everyone, and they're like, "Hey, I've got a really great idea for a book. Can you write it for me?" And I'm like, I have a lot of great ideas, most of which I'm not acting on. I don't want to act on your idea because your idea is worth nothing. It is truly worth nothing unless you're willing to do something about it. Is that fair?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's really where the rest of this article goes, and we'll put a link to it in the show notes. But, man, I know that we get these great ideas. We get excited about something, but that excitement is worth nothing unless you're willing to actually put in the work, to drudge through the drudgery, and realize, like, oh, wow, there will be this, what does Seth Godin call it? The dip, right? Yeah. There'll be this period in time where you actually feel like, oh, like, this isn't working out before it does work out. Mm-hmm. And the only way you're going to know is like with the shoe analogy. You got to be willing to try that idea on and see if that idea fits.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of frustrated people in the world who feel like, I'm an ideas guy. I'm really creative, and nobody listens to me. Nobody takes me seriously. and there's a very important distinction that a lot of people who fall into that category miss out on. And it's the distinction between adding to someone else's job description versus creating my own role, right? And what most people mistake for having an idea amounts to nothing more than creating extra work for somebody else. And you shouldn't expect your CEO or your supervisor to get excited about your ideas if all that really means is, hey, I found some more work for you to do amidst your already busy life. No, like, people respect ideas when you show a willingness to have some skin in the game, when you show a willingness to bet on it. Not when you say, hey, here's a book you ought to write, but here's an idea I believe in so much that I took the time to write the book, even though I knew it was possible that nobody would even read it, even though I knew it was possible that I was taking the risk of wasting my time. When people see you do that, they respect you. They know that you take that idea seriously, and it raises the probability that they'll actually engage it. I talked about this in my, dreams don't come true, decisions do talk, that People don't care about your idea. They care about the momentum. That's what they invest in.
You never see a job like posting online for like, we're trying to hire an idea guy.
Right.
We've just run out of ideas and our company needs someone to come in and give us more work to do.
Does any corporation have that position, really? I mean,
right, exactly. It just doesn't happen because the ideas aren't worth anything unless you're willing to go through the execution. So those are two things that have added value to my life. Your podcast, Office Hours, I definitely recommend that. Check out TK Coleman's blog, subscribe to that, and every time he writes a blog post, it'll show up right in your inbox. And also one more thing, if you want to further discussion on education, the guy where I first found you, Stephen Patterson, he has a recent episode on his podcast, which is called Patterson in Pursuit, episode 85. It's called College Isn't for Education. And he interviewed a guy named Dr. Brian Kaplan, author of a book called The Case Against Education, which there's some irony in there that a doctor wrote the book, but also maybe he's the person who's best suited to write the book as well. He's gone through all he's reached level theta 7 in the education process and learned that maybe, and by the way, he is more, Patterson is rather, dogmatic. That's not the right word, but he's on one side of the equation. He's rather anti-college. But the guy who wrote this book, Dr. Kaplan, isn't necessarily he talks about some of the reasons that you should go to college and why it makes sense and the stats behind it as well. And so it's a more nuanced approach than you might think, given the title "College Isn't for Education."
Can I toss in 2 cents on that?
Yeah, of course.
Cent number 1. Isaac Morehouse also interviewed Brian Kaplan on his podcast as well. And I think that one's particularly interesting to listen to because obviously Isaac Morehouse, my colleague, is the founder of an alternative to college, right? So he challenges him, questions him, and converses with him in a unique way. I think you'll enjoy listening to that.
I'll check it out.
Yeah. Cent number 2 is Brian Kaplan offers an interesting thought experiment. He says, consider what happens whenever there's something like a snow day or something happens where, a professor says this class is canceled. What do students do? They all celebrate. They're always happy, right? No one's ever angry about that. They're always happy, which is evidence of the fact that the product they're paying for, it's not information. It's not knowledge. It's not learning. School is the only product where the customers celebrate when it's canceled. If you go to the yoga studio and they say we're closed for snow day, you're going to be upset because you want the yoga. What do people want out of college? They want the signal. They want the credential that's going to signal to the world, hey, I'm valuable, I'm somebody. And once you realize that that's where the real value is, you can then move to the next question, which is that the most valuable signal for the times that we live in, given the various ways that we can showcase our ability to create value?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was meeting with Drew. We're talking about doing music for the next documentary, Less Is Now. And we're pretty much done filming that. We still have a few things left, and we're working on, this is our second documentary. And Drew and Nate, they did all the music. They formed a band just for the last documentary. They created the most beautiful music for it. And I went down to Orange County, and we were having lunch at this Anaheim, packing district. And I was there, and I walked in the bathroom, and I saw like a guy. At first, I just thought I was a hipster because he was wearing a stethoscope, and I'm like, "Is that the new thing that's in with fashion?" And then I realized, no, he was signaling that he was, either in residency or whatever. Like he was wearing the stethoscope around to show people, like, I am a doctor, right?
Or I'm a future doctor.
Right. Right, exactly. That was probably more likely, like I'm an aspiring doctor. But I don't know, it'd be like if I, walked around. It seems like if I walked around with like a quill pen and a ink
well, Podcast Sean, where were we at? Remember that we were at this bar and the gal was sitting there with that book. What book did she have? It was like this signal, like, I am a writer, and I'm in this.
It had to be Infinite Jest, right?
No, it wasn't. I forget what book it was, but it was this, like, I'm a writer. I'm signifying it. I'm signaling that with this book. But they were in this, like, really noisy, crowded, like, college bar. It was just a signifier to say, hey, I'm different than all of you, and I'm better than all of you.
Yeah. What's been adding value to your life recently, Ryan?
Oh man, you already gave a bunch of awesome recommendations for TK. Dude, I've been listening to this album by Frank Turner called "Be More Kind." Well, when I say it's an album, it's like, you know, how the guys and gals are releasing songs these days. Like, he's got 5 singles that he's released on this album. So it's more like an EP right now.
But it's like a forthcoming album,
right? There's like another 7 songs that Frank will release over the period of the next 10 years. I don't even know, like like I don't know what, like, I don't know what they're doing these days. I know kids like singles, but God, I think
the albums are dying. But sadly,
it is so frustrating. Like, he's got 5 amazing songs on there, and I'm just like itching to hear the rest. But anyway, check out "Be More Kind" by Frank Turner. It's a great EP at this point.
Hopefully, it will be a great album.
At some point, it will be an album, yeah.
When you first walked in here, Ryan goes, "Have I recommended Frank Turner yet?" I'm like, "Is this just some guy you know that you just want to recommend?" You guys should be friends with Frank Turner. All right, well, I'll check out Frank Turner. Is it for me or is it not for me?
No, it's not for you.
Well, you recommended to me the Lee DeWise album, the new one.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite albums of the year.
I know, and I told you would like it.
Oh my God, it's so good.
I knew you would like. That's my recommendation for the podcast we're recording tomorrow.
All right, just bleep it.
Sorry guys, I don't listen to hip hop.
No, yeah, well, okay, well,
this is not hip hop.
All right, new Jack Harlow album then. All right, let's see. Right here, right now. That's what it's time for. It's time for Right Here, Right Now, where we talk about what's going on in the lives of the minimalists. I got a few things going on here right now. We're settled in LA finally, at least mostly. We aren't traveling nearly as much or at all at this point. I'm going to do a house tour of my house. It's very ephemeral. It's going to be on Instagram Live, and so it'll only be there for 24 hours. If you want to be part of the live session, it's May 11th at 9 a.m. Pacific time, or you can tune in for the 24 hours after that, and you will be able to I don't know, come into my house for a little bit, ask me a few questions. I'll answer some questions. And we've done this with the last few places we live. We lived in the cabin in Montana. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. You can see a house tour there. Our 2 houses, when we were in Montana, we did house tours there. And really the purpose of that isn't to say, look at all this stuff that I have, you should have the same brands as me. No, it's to show you that what I live with, what I live without, and what is appropriate for my life given the stage of the life that I'm in, right? I have a family, a partner, and a 4-year-old, soon to be 5. And here are the things that are appropriate for our life right now, but also the things that we live without, and we're able to live without just fine. And so it helps you maybe take a look at my recipe, not to bake the same cake, but to figure out what are the ingredients that you want to put in your own cake, so to speak. Also, speaking of education, and not necessarily schooling, I'm teaching, so twice a year I do a writing workshop. I do a longer How to Write Better class. It's a 4-week online writing class. A lot of people don't have the time, or they don't want to make the deep dive commitment that we talked about earlier. So what I do twice a year is I do a live workshop and allow you to sort of dip your toe in the water. And so that's coming up June 24th. If you want details on that, if you want to learn how to write better, head on over to theminimalists.com/workshop. It's called How to Write Better, and it's I tweeze out some of my most important parts of the 4-week class. It's completely independent, so you'll get value from this. You don't have to take the 4-week class. It's not some sort of seminar to get you to sign up for something else, but I want to be able to help you. If you're like, I really want to start a blog, or I want to write more, I've been thinking about writing a book, maybe I can give you a few recipes, a few ingredients for my recipe that will help move you in the right direction. Theminimalists.com/workshop. That's coming up June 24th. Also, we're doing a video podcast, a video version of this podcast coming really soon this summer. If you want to subscribe to that, head on over to youtube.com/theminimalists. We're in our new studio, thanks to our Patreon supporters here. And so we got the lighting in here. TK, you can see this. It makes you instantly, if we turn this light on, it makes you look 73% more handsome immediately. And so we have really good lighting in here. We got the sound panels. They did a really great job making this studio. I mean, it's aggressively simple. I think you'd agree with that, right? And we've set it up in a way that has worked really well for us. It's a great space. I can't wait to share it with you all on the video podcast. And also, if you want the show notes to each and every episode, as well as any new writings from The Minimalists, head on over to theminimalists.com. Put your email address at the top. We'll never send you spam because that stuff's gross, but we'll email you the show notes every time we put out a new podcast episode. What else you got for us, Ryan?
I've got some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners. Check them out.
Hi, Josh and Ryan. My name is Emma. I am calling from Lumberton, North Carolina in response to your media episode, and specifically in response to the question about minimized news. I have 3 podcasts to recommend. 2 are by NPR, and 1 is by BBC. This is exclusively how I get my news now, or almost exclusively. The first podcast is NPR's Hourly News Update. It's very small, very bite-sized, usually about 5 minutes or less. They update it every hour, and using most podcast apps, you can just refresh it whenever you want to listen to it. Typically, I listen to it twice a day during my commute. And it's just kind of a little bite-sized review of everything that's been going on in daily news, daily world news. The second one is called Up First, and it's a little bit longer, usually under 15 minutes, and that's one that NPR releases on weekday mornings around 6 a.m., and that usually is geared towards people who only listen to the news once a day or twice a day. So it's kind of a roundup of everything that you might have missed over the past 24 hours. Most of it is politics and world news, but they sometimes cover entertainment as well. And the third one is called The World This Week. It's by BBC. It's typically about a half an hour, and so it's a little longer, and it covers world news over the past week. And their tagline is how the world has changed in the past 7 days. Those are the 3 podcasts that I use to get most of my news. Doing that has allowed me to listen to the news while I commute, which I otherwise would not be productive during that time. Also while I'm doing laundry or cooking dinner. It just allows me to take in the news at a time when I don't have to sit there and stare at my phone in order to do it.
Hey, Josh and Ryan. This is Morgan from Seattle and soon to be San Luis Obispo, California. I watched your documentary in April 2017, and it inspired me immediately. Over the following 5 days, I spent 25 hours going through all my things. I went to your Lessa's Now stop in Seattle, and now, after 10 months, I've taken a dozen carfuls of items to Goodwill, saved a lot of money, and freed up a significant amount of time. We're going to do the Pacific Crest Trail this year, and getting rid of things has helped to significantly reduce the stress around moving. I've developed a couple helpful approaches that I think may also help others, so I thought I might share. 1, I got rid of all my duplicates unless they were consumables. I donated unused shower gels and lotions, took craft supplies and journals to the elementary school near my home, and stopped buying trinkets when I visited new places. Ultimately, I now only allow for 1 duplicate if it's a consumable and no duplicates if I know it'll take me months to use up, like a journal. 2, for sentimental items, the single most helpful thing I've done is channel your phrase. Our memories are inside of us, not our things. And on top of that, I allow myself time. My grandpa passed away last year, which allowed me to help my mom go through my grandparents' 50 years worth of things and exercise my newfound minimizing skills. There were a lot of memories from my mom, who I must say did an impressively well job with the whole process. But I felt good about being able to see the things as things and not artifacts of my grandparents. I did keep 4 things from their house. A lamp, a silver 4-leaf clover, an old compact desk, and a necklace from my grandma. Now, as time passes, it's easier to imagine parting with some of these things as well, and they may make it into my next men's game. Lastly, I have made these changes 1 step at a time. Over the last couple months, I've found myself naturally focusing on one aspect of my life. At first, it was decluttering. Then it was finding my quote-unquote why for not consuming items. Then it was working on having good conversations with friends and family around the change I was making. Through it all, I have found it helpful to write a few relevant minimal maxims on index cards and post them on my desk at work. Sometimes I'll also take a picture of those and make them my phone background. This gives me a daily reminder of what I'm focusing on and helps me internalize the approach that I know I want, but sometimes have a hard time staying consistent with in practice.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Carlson. I'm from Flagstaff, Arizona. I've been listening to and enjoying your podcast and its inspiration very much, and I so appreciate it. I wanted to leave a tip for listeners today about both the mindful acquisition of new clothing as well as mindfully getting rid of clothing. As someone who does a lot of outdoor adventure myself, including in the wintertime, one of the pieces of clothing that we often struggle with is our base layers or our long johns. And they are pretty necessary for adventuring in cold weather, whether you're skiing, snowboarding, snowshoeing, or just building snowmen in the front yard. Base layers can often be pretty ill-fitting, poorly made. The fabrics are not always very environmentally sustainable. It's certainly something that I have struggled with plenty of times. I recently came to know about this clothing company started by a husband and wife team. It's called Corbeau Clothing. And they created their company to fix this exact problem. They focus exclusively on base layers, and they make all of their things to fit and perform well. All of it's made out of sustainable fabrics, and it's made in Aspen, Colorado. It is pricier, of course, than some of the cheaper things you're going to find, but it is well worth the price, in my opinion. But even better than that, they have a mission and a nonprofit arm they call Join the Flight. And this company allows you to donate new or gently used cold weather outdoor gear for distribution to porters and guides in third world countries. Westerners, including the founders of this company, in traveling to these third world countries to climb mountains, have created a demand for guide services. And that's great for the local economy for these people. But often now these people are going to altitude and temperatures that they don't have the proper clothing to be at, and that is putting them in a safety situation. So the founders of Corbeau Clothing will collect donations of these new or gently used items that maybe, someone gave it to you, it's not a color you like, or it just doesn't fit you quite to your liking. And they'll take them and they collect them, and then once or twice a year they go to these communities personally. The founders actually go and hand off these items to the people in those communities, so you know that they're getting into the hands of the right people. I think that's just incredibly, incredibly cool how they have seen problems in their industry and are working to solve it. So if you want to check them out, they are online if you want to check out their products, or the Join the Flight campaign, CorbeauClothing.com. Corbeau is the French word for raven. It's spelled Corbeaux. Really cool people, really interesting company that I thought the listeners might like to know about.
All right, y'all. That's it for this episode. If you have a question for the Minimalists, give us a call, 406-219-7839. And before we leave here, I just want to say, TK, thank you so much for being a part of this, man. Dude. I found it to be a really meaningful conversation. I'm grateful you decided to spend this time with us.
Man, this was really fun. I feel really honored that you guys had me on. It's been great hanging out.
I appreciate that. So if you all have a comment or tip or a question for us, you can give us a phone call, or you can leave us a voice memo, podcast@theminimalists.com. Check out TK Coleman's work over at tkcoleman.com. And if you leave here with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all.
We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.